Hi YouTube, how are you? Welcome to the Stratosphere Studio. It's Monday the 8th of December, and I hope everybody's doing well. Um, been a busy beat, working on a lot of the foundational stuff, writing scenes. I am all colonies all the time, and it's really exciting. The I haven't heard back on some of the people that I approached, like two or three people initially on the financing. Uh, you know, you obviously have to be careful about these kind of things because they're prone to error, and you need to be just constantly on the watch for that because you can get yourself into some trouble. With that said, uh, I've been talking with ChatGPT about a lot of things. I've been talking about a lot of physics. Also been talking about a lot of personal things. And back a couple weeks ago, when after I'd had this lightning bolt of life-changing experience, which I've talked about so many times in the last couple of weeks, but the experience of being at that fundraiser and just watching somebody commit $250,000, which was more than enough to get this thing off the ground. Um, so I wrote initial letters to those people, and I started getting a little nervous, because haven't had a lot of experience with fundraising, and generally, in fact, my experience with money and financial stuff has been poor, largely because of my personal history. Let me just do one thing here. I grew up, as you know, a poor black child, but seriously, I'll give you a quick little talk about this. So I grew up in Bermuda. My dad was a hotel manager. It was about as idyllic a life as could possibly imagine. I was on the beach every day. I was going to British schools. I don't remember wanting for anything. It wasn't like we were wealthy. We were probably, well, we were solidly middle class. Many, many, many years later, my dad told me he never made more than $44,000 in one year. But a lot of the side benefits came from the hotels. So we had the ability to go down to the hotel and write checks for cheeseburgers, and just Billy would sign Billy on the cheeseburger thing. So it was idyllic for me. And then we moved to Florida, and in '70, we didn't live in a luxury hotel. We actually had a house overlooking a luxury hotel. If you go back and look at it now, I think it would be extremely small. But my point is, it wasn't like poverty or hardship or anything. However, we moved to Florida, Key Biscayne, in 1972, and in '74 my parents got divorced, and then things changed dramatically. By the time I got to college, money was really, really tight. My dad was gonna kind of fund my college, but he had sort of a financial meltdown. His enormous sort of what's the word, nest egg, I guess, was he had this incredible coin collection, but it got stolen. And so by the time I was in my first or second year at college, really, really, really tight on money. I've told you these stories many times. You're driving around and looking for change in the coin slots, and I was and still am 6'1", but the lowest I think I ever saw myself recorded weighing was 119, which is like concentration camp thing. Really not good. And ever since then, with all these odd jobs and everything, it's just been something I didn't understand. Yes, I found $1. I'm not going to tell that story again, but it was a great, great, great day. Um, and I've always just been kind of, this kind of troubadour lifestyle of just sort of following your dream and not taking a long-term job for other people. I mean, when I came here as an editor, I mean, I was a limousine driver, and I was, a security guard, and I was a temp, and I was all those things. I got some editing jobs in Hollywood back in the late '90s, early 2000s, and most of those were one-time gigs, which, so you burn through that money and you're waiting for the next one, and then you're just kind of hanging on, and ended up working 5 years on a show, which, if I'd known that, would have been an enormous relief. But the problem with that was, when I did 5 years on Sunday Morning Shootout, it was like job security for a 2 or 3 month period. Every time the show came up for renewal, we were on the bubble. We just never knew. So it was kind of like, it's like I had a 3 month job for 5 years, and that's what it felt like. So anyway, all of this stuff had really colored my view about these kind of things. And the short form of this, and I'm telling you all this since we're always just just really honest on the show, it's a therapy session for me more than anything. But virtually all the time that I've had to ask for money, it was because I was in personal financial hardship, and so it was always just accompanied by just real shame and humiliation. You're just having to, like, what's that line? I know the line. In Bed Bugs and Ballyhoo, I was just listening to that '80s tune, and there's a line in there where it says, down on your knees again, saying please again. And I just thought, yeah, man, that's what it felt like. It's always been a real problem for me. So I sent out the initial letters to these people, and I talked to the financial guy, and I went down. He invited me to his house, this billionaire, and then I did a couple of follow-up emails. And then I sent out some, and I hadn't heard back, and I haven't heard back in a while. And I was just about to write, emails like, hey, did you get this? Or, that kind of thing. And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to just do this right now. I'm gonna talk to ChatGPT about this. Because this is the kind of thing that ChatGPT has actually some experience in. So ChatGPT doesn't really think. Really, it collates and has an enormous database of experience, but that's good. So just before I sent off these two kind of nervous emails, like, hey, just wondering, hadn't heard back from you, kind of just a sort of Weasley kind of thing. At least I'm making the effort, right? So I caught myself, and I basically told ChatGPT my life story that I just told you, essentially just the kind of the abbreviated version. And I said to ChatGPT, here's my problem. I don't know the language of these people, and I make assumptions predicated on my past psychological experiences, and I would like some advice on how to deal with this. And ChatGPT came back with, well, first of all, ChatGPT is written to be extremely supportive, and it can sometimes go too far and be, obsequious and stuff. But what ChatGPT said was, well, thank you for the honest appraisal, Bill, and I gave him all the details like I just gave you. Thank you very much, John Condon. And so it said, here are things that people who've been through what you've been through tend to do, and listed a bunch of things. But one thing that it said just went through me like a hot knife, and it said like a bullet points of things that people who've been through my experience with money and stuff tend to do, and one of them was catastrophizing silence. And I said, holy cow, that's an amazing expression, catastrophizing silence, because that's exactly what I do. I haven't heard back from somebody in a week or two, and it's because I've offended them. It's because I've offended them, or I asked them for money, or I asked them for too much, or all of these things that just become part of old scripts that you run in your head. And when it said catastrophizing silence, I just thought, man, I sure enough do that. And I started typing that catastrophizing silence really rings a bell. So yes, that's really common. So I basically cut and pasted and told ChatGPT the transactions up to this point with 3 different people that I've been dealing with, and Asafindi says AI is programmed to be a people pleaser and to encourage you via suggestions to keep conversation going. It's absolutely true yet, Asafindi, but I'm kind of guarding against this, right? So, so it said, I said, this, and one guy is a very big conservative donor, and he's very sophisticated, and he's got a lot of people in orbit around him, and he likes kind of having people approaching him, and he likes being, he likes being courted and all of this, and so it gave me a response for that. And then there was another guy who I know much more personally, and he gave me another response for that. Another guy gave me much more personally. So I sent out happy, like Thanksgiving messages like 2-3 days before Thanksgiving. Didn't talk about the projects at all, and didn't hear back from any of them either. And so a couple days ago, I said, I'm starting to feel this nervousness again, and ChatGPT explained to me things that I think most of you probably just understand, but for people like me, or just like enough to cause you to practically panic. They said, look, all three of these people are extremely important and busy people. They probably got 2,000 Thanksgiving messages and so on, but this person has come to see you speak many times, has invited you to his house. This person invited you to their house. This person is doing this for you. I'm here to tell you that wealthy investors do not do that for everybody. They don't do it unless they're interested, and if you go to them with something, you have already earned their respect. And then it said something that really just helped me so much. He said, Bill, you are not a supplicant, you are a peer. And you have earned you've earned your peerage with people on this level. And so what we don't want to do is we don't want to have anything that has language that sounds a little bit desperate, because that can smell a little bad. I thought, man, this sounds great. So it's been an enormous comfort for me, and has actually increased my confidence. I'm just pulling every string I can to get to this, and I don't think it's going to be a problem. I really don't. Kirk's Bamboo Bazooka says those internal monologues can kill you. They can. The internal monologues are the things that destroy our prosperity and our ability to go out there and take risks and make something happen. That these internal monologues about, well, I don't know, they're going to think less of me, or it's like, no. Now it's like, now I think, now I just feel like, and I have since this conversation 2 weeks before, 2 days before Thanksgiving. Ever since then, I've just felt like there's just this enormous flood of money that's just coming my way. It's just enormous waves of money coming this way. More money than I know what to do with. And it's on its way, and it's going to get here soon, and that's a really good change of feeling. The Eric Blake says the internal monologue is what convinced you to miss the total solar eclipse. Yeah, that was a bad day. But anyway, I just wanted to say all of that to let you know. So all of those things are in motion, and 2 or 3 other people that are in motion, and then I'm just going to keep going to everybody in motion. So Dave's Reels Area 51 says lots and lots of money, playa. It was a great performance, really great performance in Tropic Thunder. So I'm as I said, I am going everywhere, and I am. It's a great. It's a great idea. It's a great project. It's a great pitch. I've got a lot of background, and I'm just going to keep going until I get it. I need. I've got. I need 7 founding fathers, and I've got 1 of them already. So I need 6 more. And I can't really talk about it. I certainly can't solicit them. Our Denham says, I've only had one wealthy friend. He had trouble giving money away because he gave people who squandered it. Ask wealthy people how to convince other wealthy people you aren't a grift. That's pretty much what I've done with these cases. Is can you put your eyes on this and tell me what you think about this business plan, and so on. So yeah, the big change. I didn't even know this existed until I talked to ChatGPT about this back in probably early October, and that is the difference between crowdfunding and equity crowdfunding. Equity crowdfunding is just really, really different, really cool. So I put together an executive summary on how that would work, and I put together a feasibility study for the colonies and so on and so forth. But in equity crowdfunding, as opposed to normal crowdfunding, in crowdfunding, somebody might make a $100 donation. You have these different tiers. You get different rewards. Equity crowdfunding, and it's handled by a third party. Equity crowdfunding basically says you put in $100, and then there's a couple of different revenue streams. But if you put in $100 and you're in the first tier or whatever, you will get all of the money that comes in until you get 120% of your investment, so a 20% profit. And then you get 50% of the revenues that come in until you get double your money back, 200%, at which point all revenues go to the creative team. That'd be the studio. And I don't know, man, it's got a really nicer appeal to it. And it makes people, they're not strictly partners because they don't have any say over the use of it, but equity crowdfunding is a real invention, a real breakthrough, and I think that the Chosen started doing that in its later seasons. The Chosen's just been a road mark for me, a roadway, a pathway. They did an initial raise of $10 million, and so far they've made $294 million, so it's not bad. And that's the way to go. Effin Geek AZ says Disney's planning something like that too. Disney can go to hell. Disney's the richest company in the entertainment business. They're gonna go crowdfund things, are they? So they can make some more culture destroying crap. Disney, Eric is like the last guy there. Andrew DeLay says equity crowdfunding seems like inviting a lot of financial regulation in. It turns out it's not. There are a number of online things that do this. It's a very simple deal, and I asked ChatGPT, does this involve like the kind of SEC stuff that you had to do with like a limited partnership? That's how they finance movies when I was doing most of my youth, limited partnership, you have to approach, they have to be sophisticated investors, you have to give them a prospectus telling everything go wrong and all the rest of it. Equity crowdfunding is not nearly that restrictive. So there we go. Quibo says Netflix will just use AI in normal filmmaking. So I wanted to talk about that too. Couple things about the colonies, and I'll get to questions because I had to choke on the questions last time. So anyway, on the financial end, I'm just feeling really, really good. I want to talk briefly about AI slop because this is Coffee Shinato says like WeFunder.com. I have a list of them, and I don't know if that's one of them. It sounds like it might be. I'm not going to open the link because I don't want to get distracted. But yeah, they have to approve the project, and then basically they handle everything. So the thing basically works in tiers. In levels. So the procedure for me is I've got to get 6 investors that I have to approach privately, and get 6 guys at 50 grand each. I have to that'll allow me to put together tier 1. So tier 0 is kind of a private thing. And that was not a solicitation. I cannot be clear enough about this. I could get in trouble if it turns out that people think that I'm just explaining to you the process. So that money goes to setting up the tier one crowdfunding. So tier one is the pilot episode. We're probably looking at about 600,000 for that, I think. And that includes things like getting the sizzle reel done. It includes the website. It includes the legal fees. It includes everything needed to get that up there, to get to $600,000 of equity crowdfunding. And a significant portion of that is marketing, is just getting it in front of people's eyeballs. If the $600,000 tier closes and we do the pilot episode, then the tier two would be to do the rest of, it's a sizzle reel, not a scissor reel. Sizzle reel. It's a sizzle reel is here's what it looks like, and I've got some really good stuff on that already, and I got to get more into that. So then tier one would be probably $2 to $3 million, something like that, to do the whole first season, which is dirt cheap for 8 episodes. The pilot would be included in that money. And then tier two would be to fund the entire second season, and tier three would be to fund well, technically tier four would fund season 3 and so on. And by the time that you've gotten 3 or 4 of these tiers done, and you've closed, it's called the waterfall, because the tier 0 people get all the revenues until they get their 120 back, and then half the revenues until they get their 200, which case that closes. So the first people in are the first people out, but by the time you get to 3 or 4 raises, the studio should have enough money to not have to do this again, and you're just internally funding the project, at which point it becomes a perpetual motion machine. If you can keep making product inexpensively, this is the key. Inexpensively, you have enough revenue coming in so that you no longer have to do the equity crowdfunding, and that is the goal, because then you've got income flowing in. You've already paid back your tier 1, 2, 3 equity crowdfunding people. They've made double their money. Everybody's happy, and you're now all of the revenue is coming to you, and then you can do things like Big Bad Problems and whatever else you want to do. Anyway, there you go. So that's the financial thing. I do want to talk about AI slop, and then I want to talk a little bit about some of the science that I've been working on, and then after that, we'll go to questions. So one thing that I had somewhat anticipated, but it happened much faster than I thought it would, and the backlash against it has been probably more harsh and more immediate than I thought it would be, and that's AI slop. There's a lot of AI slop out there, and I can't stand it either. I just hate it, and so I worry about this, and I partially tell myself stories to reassure myself, but basically it seems to me that the main problem with AI slop is, well, 2 problems. One of them is laziness. Most of the AI slop that's out there is text to video, and almost all of it is people trying to do like ads or something. So text to video is you type in, one person says something, one person says something else. You got an interview on the street, and then you allow the AI to do it comes up with its own dialogue, and it comes up with its own performances. The other aspect of AI slop is that it's just lazy video, text to video. So the 2 things that I'm trying to do, we're rapidly, Dave's Real Area 51 says, that character has 6 fingers on one hand, no one will notice. We're almost out of those woods, almost. There's still some hallucination, but it's getting better really fast. But the 2 things that I'm determined to do that I want to keep it away from AI slop is, most of the slop is when people type in a text about an interview or a guy running away or something, and he leaves everything up to the AI. But what we're going to do is we're going we're going to be very, very selective about the starting image, because all of this stuff really comes from a starting image. And we're going to do whatever we have to combine so that the starting images are really high quality. But I think the most important thing that's going to keep this out of AI slop is everything that we do is going to be a motion capture performance by an actor. I'm going to have real actors reading the lines, and then I'm going to take that and map it onto AI characters, the way I did with the Zeus stuff. And that gets the flat acting, and in fact, there is something now, I guess you could call AI acting. I can't really describe it. I just know it, and everybody else knows it. It's what makes it slop, right? Somebody, the reactions are a little over the top, or they're, it's just, okay. It's just generic. But if you use actual actors who are reading lines, we get their facial expressions are directly mapped onto the characters. Their vocal recording is done. It's not doing a lip sync off of text generated dialogue, and it's not making up its own dialogue. Its own dialogue is just hot garbage, hot garbage compared to what real writers do. Like a lot of times, I was working on this thing that I just finished up, where it's a documentary about Planned Parenthood, and I'm recreating scenes that happen in clinics, and I just need a shot of a person looking around or sad or something. So I'll just type in, I just need something, the woman sits at the desk, looks around, pulls up a file, opens it, and looks sad and depressed. And so I'll type that in, and then I'll give it to something like VO3, and she'll pull it out and she'll go, "Oh no, what a terrible surprise. This is worse than I could have imagined." I think, edit the prompt like she doesn't say anything. So that kind of bad acting slop gets them, clears a lot of the table. But the ability to have real actors is great, and the best thing about it is they don't have to leave their house. I can talk to John Voight or Gary Sinise or anybody else and just ask them if they want to be a part of this, pay them, and they can do it into their iPhone. And I can watch it on a Zoom call. And that's going to take a little bit of getting used to on their part, but oh, hi, Mark. Yeah. I didn't do it. I didn't. Oh, hi, Mark. Wow, was it me? Tommy Russo, was it? Russo. So I think combining the real attention to the visuals and having actual actors do the performances, I think gets us out of AI slop. The Bumpy Ride Home thing and the stuff on Two Futures, I didn't have any dialogue there because I was just looking for those moments. I'd run an 8-second animation, and I'd take 2 seconds or 3 seconds of the two people looking at each other and laughing or whatever, and just looking for that that human moment. In fact, on the Two Futures thing, there's one shot, and it's one of 50, 60 shots in there of the colonists, and it's this young man who's walking with this older woman, and he's just looking at the camera, and he's just got this kind of smile, and it just looks so real to me, just so authentic. So that's basically what I'm trying to do to get around the AI slop. Now, the recent news is that we have things have happened now technologically that are getting us rapidly to the point that I wanted to, where you can be serious, and a lot of it is due to software called Nano Banana Pro. So Nano Banana is it deals primarily with still images, but here's the thing that's really revolutionary about that, because the problem is consistency. So now in Nano Banana Pro, you can have a full length shot of your actor in a scene. There's software called Imagine Me or Imagine You. It's very, very good at preserving faces. So I take a reference face, I go to Imagine You, I have a character in a scene, and that character looks really, really, really good, with the referencing. But Nano Banana Pro now is at the point where you're able to train Nano Banana Pro on the character, and training them means showing. I think to generate a character, train character in Nano Banana Pro, you need 30 images of that character. So you start out with your perfect reference image, and then you do like a 360-degree spin of the person's head, and then you can change their expressions. You can show them what a smile looks like, wince, all this other stuff. Give it something to learn. You put that stuff into Nano Banana Pro, and then it is trained on that character so that it knows what that character looks like from every different angle, and they don't start drifting away when you start putting them into scenes. Then you combine that with various animation software, and if you want to do the motion capture, Runway can do that, and probably another. Also, what I'm seeing now, I don't know if this is in Nano Banana Pro, but there's a bunch of different stuff out there. The beautiful thing about Nano Banana Pro is you can have a starting scene of your character, and then you can say, give me an extreme close-up of the left eye, and it'll give you like the whole frame. Give me a shot looking down on the character. Give me a low-angle shot. Give me a side shot. Give me all of these things. And these become starting images that you can animate, but the beautiful thing about these is they're all in the same environment. They're the same lighting. They're the same face. And now you can start getting accurate characters, and I think we're at the point now where you can do that for multiple characters. So I can train it for Jake, I can train it for Lisa, I can train it for Claire, and I can train it for Will. And I can just say, put these people here. There's Nano Banana and other software that would allow me to take Jake, let's say, and I go on, Pinterest, and I find a cool looking science fiction outfit or maybe mountaineering cold outfit, and it's just a picture of the outfit, and I just say, put it on this guy, and then it's on the guy. So now you've got them in their clothes. It's a time consuming process where, but once you do it, you can really start moving. Andrew Lambden says, how does all this work with helmets and things that block the faces? Is the AI to the point where you can have the faces in motion cap behind the glares and light reflections on the visors? Yes, it is. And that was one of the most difficult things to do in AI, I mean in CGI, trying to get a realistic face. It is, and as you could see from the bumpy ride home, all of these helmets have like marks and scratches on them, and the reflections are perfect, and it's just astonishing how much stuff this stuff gets done. So Castellan says, I recommend outfits like Zardoz. Yes, that's what we're going to use for our ice planet. Is we're going to use the Mankini, and so on. The Gentle Ben says, though when you get colonies up and running, will you require more computational power on your end? I don't think so, because almost all of this stuff happens online. A faster internet connection would help, and having a team would help, because I could when I have a little bit more resources, I could set up 3 different accounts on Nano Banana, and these things take a minute or 2 or 3, and sometimes an 8-second render animation will be 3-4 minutes of waiting. And if we had other people here, we could just be like, this is your job, get me this shot, and take a look at them, and we'll do that. Yeah, it's time to start getting organized with this. But the fact that Nano Banana now allows me, prior to this, if I wanted to do a shot, let's say I want to do Jake and Lisa walking along a frozen shore, I'd have to have a wide shot of them, and then I'd have to tell Midjourney to get in for a close up, and Midjourney would mess up the faces and have to do it 50, 60 times. You couldn't get the shot you wanted exactly. Nano Banana Pros, you can say, now move in another 2 feet and move a foot to the right, and there you go. Airtech says you need to compute somewhere. It's being done on a cloud. They'll add the resources, but they'll charge you for it. They do charge you for it, but I honestly cannot believe how little this stuff costs. Honestly, on the Two Futures thing for the colonies, I think that was probably $300 or $400 of render time, which is nothing. Quiba says Netflix might stream your colonies. Yes, they might. But Netflix is going to have to understand that we're going to follow the Chosen model. And Netflix has paid, I don't know, it's Netflix or Amazon Prime, one of those two, has all 5 seasons of The Chosen. And I've watched them on one of those two streaming things, whichever it was. But The Chosen was made free to everybody before it ended up on Netflix. And that's where we're going, because I'm not locking this behind a firewall, a paywall rather. So not just the investors get to see it for free. Everybody has to see it for free. F and Geek says Angel for the win. They have good content. Yes, but I can't work. I can't do it with Angel. I'm working on editing Mike Rowe's new show, and I've done 14 or 15 episodes of that, and I've edited a couple. The problem with Angel, I'm not criticizing Angel. I think Angel's wonderful, but Angel has a review board, and their review board is extremely sensitive about you can't even say a damn. Really, a damn is. I've been told to cut out damns and and bastards, and I can't really do that. So we got a plan to get this out to a lot of people, and the crowdsourcing aspect of it is really, I think, one of the most brilliant ideas, because the crowdsourcing, the world building and not crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, letting people develop elements of the lore, develop all of that stuff is really, really cool, and it gives people an investment in it that you wouldn't have from really anything else. So I really think that aspect of the fan base being a part of it is really, really, really great, and saves it's like if the iPhone had didn't have open architecture, we'd have 50, 60 apps, the ones that the Apple developers came up with. But because they decided to make it open architecture, there's millions of apps, and a lot of apps are things that nobody could have imagined. Just like whoever had that idea. It's astonishing. So we talked about the canon aspects of it and all that stuff before, but we're not going to go into that again. What I do want to talk about briefly is this, and that is the some of the science behind it. Now I've got. I worked with ChatGPT about this. I just got something I'll read to you. It's not there yet. In fact, I've got an example here, and the example kind of falls apart. So I need to redo this, but I wanted to read it to you anyway to give you an idea of what we're talking about. One of the things I'm most excited about is real recent development. This is always going to be hard science fiction, and no magic and all that stuff. And I had to say to myself, no magic, except for the fact that we've got these stargates, and the amount of energy needed to warp space and connect these wormholes between these two stargates and stuff is astronomical, but theoretically not. But it was always the weak point in this. And independently of this, I saw a bunch of videos on quantum information holography, which were really beautiful. And quantum information holography is kind of in a gray zone about whether or not it's just complete fantasy or whether there's something to it. But I decided I had done a lot of work with Grok on stargates and wormholes and that kind of thing. And then just a week or two ago, I had another just lightning bolt of an idea, and that was simply this: at when Star Trek came out in 1966, they had actual writers, they had actual science fiction writers, and Roddenberry was one of them. And when they made Star Trek and everything that followed after Star Trek, when they made Star Trek, they did everything they could to include the latest physics that they could get. That they were working with what was cutting edge physics in 1966. And all of this was relativistic physics. Relativistic physics is what tells us we will never explore beyond the solar system, because the speed of light is limited in space, and every experiment that's ever been done has proven this to be the case. And I spent a long time thinking, the wormholes are just wishful thinking. The actual ability to travel faster than light is just not possible. And so back to Star Trek. So they used terms that were relativistic, Einsteinian relativity, and these would be things like a space warp. Wormholes eventually worked their way into the picture, although I don't think they were in the original series. But time-space warps, space-time, all of this stuff is there, and everything that followed after it. Star Wars, of course, doesn't really have anything in it that counts as science, but they did have the hyperdrive, and you could clearly tell that they were not in real space. And then you got things in the wormhole, and everything after that was all relativistic Einsteinian physics. Even The Expanse, which everybody talked about being so realistic, copped out once they developed that, whatever that, multi-dimensional pathway thing was, right? And Babylon 5 has, ships coming out of hyperspace, out of wormholes, and any science fiction thing that you can think about has some form of that sort of travel for faster than light travel. The warp drive, or the jump drive, or the this drive, or the whatever. And none of them are possible with Einsteinian physics, because the energy requirements to bend space-time or bubble around space-time, you move the bubble through space-time, but the ship isn't really exceeding the speed of light because the bubble is internally and all this, and you realize, well, it only requires enough energy to power 7 galaxies to do this, or bending space, all the energy, it's like, it's 10 to the 26 power joules to do this. Yes, and Stargate were wormholes. Everything you've ever seen used terms, and I was using them for the colonies too. Stargates, wormholes, warps, warp drive, FTL, all of this stuff. And then I realized every piece of science fiction that you and I have ever seen, including the Alcubierre drive, Andrew DeLay is over there, every piece of science fiction that we've ever seen is using physics that were done in 1913 through like 1919. I remember when, somewhere in there. It was the first 2 decades of the 20th century. So we've been talking about science fiction in relativistic terms. Quantum leaps is a little bit different. But we've been talking about science fiction and faster than light travel in relativistic terms for 50, 60 years now. And then I realized, no, 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 no. What the colonies is going to do is the colonies is not going to have its not just going to have its own look. The colonies is going to have its own vocabulary, and the colonies are going to use 21st century physics. We're going to be using terms that no one has ever used before, and it's going to sound brand new. It's going to look brand new. It's going to sound brand new. It's going to feel brand new, because we're going to be talking about quantum physics, not relativistic physics. And if you start looking at the geostationary picture, looking way down on quantum physics and relativistic physics, you find the same thing that you had with relativistic physics and Newtonian physics, classical physics. So Newtonian physics is you hit a pool ball and off it goes, and things that orbit the sun and all of that, and it works really well for most things. But Einstein said that that Newtonian physics live inside a much larger world of relativistic stuff, and you have to take into account things like this. So gravity is no longer like a strange attractor, according to Einstein. According to Einstein, gravity is bent space-time. Einstein came up with the idea of space-time, that the universe is made out of stuff called space-time. It's not it's a vacuum, but there is a sort of a substance to it. And light cannot go through space-time faster than the speed of light. And that limits us. And bending the structure of the universe, bending the actual physical matrix that makes up the physical universe, requires massive amounts of energy, because space-time is a thing. And space-time is real. We know that things slow down when you go faster. Relativistic effects are real. I'm not saying they're not real. But what I am saying is that when you start getting into quantum, really getting into quantum, what you find is that Einstein then becomes a subset of a larger set of physics, which is quantum physics and quantum reality. And what quantum says is that space-time and everything we see, relativity, warp space, all of this stuff is projected by a level of information that lives underneath the universe and actually projects the universe, creates the universe. That gravity is not a magnetic attraction like with Newton, and it's not bent space-time like with Einstein. Gravity is a probability problem. Gravity is a set of circumstances that makes something likely, and that these qubits are not in our universe, but they create the universe out of probability. So what I did working with ChatGPT was, I said, I want to put together a lecture on how these gates work. I know this is Tell Me Professor, and you can't put this into the show like this, because it's just a big old exposition pill. People don't talk that way. But I want to write a lecture, as if I was giving a lecture to people on how this transportation system works. And I have to very carefully, because it's so pernicious, it's so pervasive that you don't even realize it. I mentioned this briefly on the Stratosphere Lounge last time. All of these terms have to go. In the colonies, you're never going to hear space-time. You're never going to hear wormholes. You're never going to hear stargates. You're never going to hear warp drive. You're never going to hear faster than light travel, because there is no travel. In the colonies, these ships are able to go from one place to another, but they don't travel. And this is the breakthrough. So the vocabulary will be as fresh for viewers as Star Trek was in 1966. Because prior to 1966, prior to Star Trek, people were just talking about rockets, and no one was talking about relativistic effects, and no one. The Jupiter 2 is is just going to Alpha Centauri, and it's got an anti-gravity drive or something. But they never dealt with it until Star Trek came along. And once I realized this, everything just went boom. So I'm going to read you the first draft of this lecture. It'll be given on a stage, and it'll be like a TED Talk. It breaks down towards the end, and I have to fix the ending. So understand that it needs a lot of work, and this is just the first chapter. But I'm gonna read it to you anyway. So this is a TED Talk from from 2200, 2300, something like that. Yes, they're not driving; they're traveling. And again, it's unfinished. This is just the setup in order to get into how. I almost said the gates, but they're not stargates. I haven't decided what I'm going to call them yet. I'm probably going to call them probability stations, but you'll get the idea. So I'll read you this, and then I'll explain how the faster than light series of stations works, and then we'll get to questions. All right. So this is the first draft of the TED Talk. Guy on stage talking to an audience. It says, ladies and gentlemen, distance is an illusion. Separateness, in fact, is an illusion as well, but that's a week's lecture on its own, so let's skip over that particular rabbit hole for today. For now, put aside everything you think you know about the universe and how it's made, because the world of physics and mathematics we are about to enter is so removed from the everyday world of our senses that our biggest challenge will not be in learning new things, but rather unlearning old ones. Now, some of these concepts are so alien to our everyday way of life that way of thinking that it's actually impossible. So let me just read that again. Some of these concepts are so alien to our everyday way of thinking that it's actually impossible for our everyday monkey brains to handle. I like to call this the horsepower limit. Now, for example, we know in the abstract what infinity means, just like we know what eternity means. We know that the universe is expanding, but expanding into what? What's on the other side of the bubble that all of this stuff is in? If I tell you there's nothing on the other side of our expanding universe, you maybe think of empty space with no stars or galaxies or matter of any kind of it, or perhaps it's a huge, like white painted, featureless void, both of which are things. The idea of nothing out on the other side of this exceeds our horsepower limit. We don't have the neurons to understand it. But the math doesn't lie. And you should take solace in the fact that those same monkey brains came up with the math that describes these things that are impossible to fully grasp. So, welcome to the world of quantum information physics. And despite the horsepower limit, the fact is that you can learn a lot about the world by just looking at the shadows on the wall. So let's begin by imagining you're standing in front of a regular dinner table. Next, imagine that I spread a jet black tablecloth over this structure. That tablecloth, over this table, that tablecloth is not the structure that creates the universe. It's the structure that encodes the universe. That black tablecloth is composed of infinitely small, yet discrete and individual, teeny tiny little dots called qubits. Do you ever zoom in on a lithograph, a printed image? Lots and lots and lots of little individual dots, all the same size, each carrying brightness and color. Same thing with a computer screen. Individual pixels carrying information, brightness, and color. So how small are these qubits? See, that's a false premise. See how pernicious our real-world biases are? They don't have a size. They're infinitely small. They don't have a size because they don't exist in our three-dimensional universe. They create the three-dimensional universe. Unlike a pixel or a lithograph dot of colored ink, if you try to zoom in on a qubit, you will never get there. Never. To use somewhat more obsolete cosmology, it's turtles all the way down. Now, as I said, if you're coming with us on this trip, you've got to trust the math and learn to love the incomprehensible. So, back to our black tablecloth composed of qubits. Think of a qubit as a probability pixel. These qubits form a web. They're connected to each other. It's a quantum substrate of interconnected informational nodes. So what this black tablecloth really is best thought of as an extremely dense information layer. Okay, now for the fun part. And this is the single most important thing that's going to come out of my mouth tonight. This information layer does not exist out there somewhere in reality. This information layer creates reality. It's taken over 100 years to beat the Einstein out of us, but there it is. The universe is not made of space-time. The universe is made of information. Okay, now put your hands on your armrests. Wood, right? Wood. Wood is real, right? So how do we make wood out of information? How do we get oak out of all of these little probability pixels? Well, matter, all matter, is a stable pattern of probabilities. Touch the wood. That's what stable probability feels like. Now, I'm making a pretty big leap here, but in a nutshell, given all of the things that are constantly happening in that shimmering, vibrating quantum web of qubits, that black tablecloth, all of the things that influence the probability fields in that information layer that interconnect all of the qubits in existence, you feel wood under your hand because the arrangement of real-world particles that make up wood have the highest levels of stable probability. In other words, given all the variables, and the variables are infinite, and given the history of the universe up until this point, wood is more likely, the probability of wood is more stable than it would be for peanut butter or shoe polish. Now, in quantum mechanics, this process of freezing qubit probability into something in the world of classical physics, like an oak tree to make wood handrests out of, this process is known as decoherence. Now, our monkey brains tell us that if all of this fantastic stuff is true, the very least quantum theory could do would be to say that the wood should cohere into existence. That would be the decent thing for it to do. But no, our intuition says that wood should cohere into existence. But the math says that solid matter has decohered out of possibility and into the very, 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 very high level of stable probability that we call reality, which in this example is wood, or oak to be specific. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why quantum theory, and this, ladies and gentlemen, is why quantum physics is a likely story. And that's all I've got written, but basically what I'm laying out the case for is that these qubits connected to all of these other information pixels, probability pixels, create reality, and it does it at Planck time. That's the smallest unit of time. Time is not linear. Time moves in dot, 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 dot. Planck time is the amount of time it takes for a photon of light to cross a hydrogen atom, which is very, 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 very small, and light is very, very fast. So Planck time is very, very small, but it is a discrete unit. The universe is in a frame, and then it's in a next frame, and it's in a next frame, and it's not analog. It's digital like that. So, by the way, qubit sounds like a biblical term, but it's actually a quantum bit. It's QUBIT, not CUBIT. QUBIT is quantum bit. All right. So basically, here's what the here's how the faster than light mechanism is going to work in the colonies. What I need from a story point of view is I need railroads. We're using real-world stars. Okay. So we're using real-world stars, and I can't have these points connect to any place randomly. It's got to be a line. You can't just go from here to anywhere else magically, which I'll explain in a minute. So instead of thinking, let's say that for the sake of the argument, I won't come up with this number because this number's too on the nose, but for the sake of the argument, one of these, what I used to call stargates, I'm probably going to call, like I say, a probability station now, is something that happens in point B. So here's how it works. Back at point A, you take a large amount of iodized hydrogen, and using a slower than light spaceship at 60-70% of the speed of light, you go out to 1 light year, okay, and then you stop. Now, the hydrogen that you've taken from a batch of hydrogen that's back on Earth. You basically just split it, so they're siblings. So these atoms are entangled with each other. And at 1 light year, at point B, you build your mechanism. And what this mechanism is, it's really pretty simple. It's a ring, and the ring is able to project a very, very intense magnetic field. So you've got a ring back at Earth at point A, and you've got a ring 1 light year away at point B. And what you do is you take that hydrogen, which you've taken from point A, and you inject both at point A, and this has to be done at exactly the same time using universal time standards corrected for relativity and all that other stuff. And what you do is you create a very thin diaphragm of magnetic fields, and you inject the hydrogen into those two diaphragms at the same time. So now you've got hydrogen from Earth, half of which is in the point A diagram, and hydrogen from Earth, half of which is in the point B diagram, and they're both now inside this ring, contained by magnetic fields in a very, very thin diagram. So these gases are entangled with each other, but you've got a problem. All of these qubits that are creating reality have put a this is a great term, have put a probability fingerprint on the universe. And again, it's not going to be 1 light year because it's too much on the nose, but stay with me on this. So what happens is, at the time of transit, extremely intense lasers hit every single hydrogen atom, which seems impossible today, but that's just an engineering problem. That's just an engineering problem. Hit every single hydrogen atom and charge it with energy until all of the quantum states of those atoms they've all got the same spin, they've all got the same, the various quantum turns. You're basically creating identical conditions for these two diaphragms of hydrogen inside this belt. And this happens in the space of just 5 or 10 milliseconds. It's very, very fast. But what happens is, if you can make the quantum state of diaphragm A and the quantum state of diaphragm B identical, then the universe doesn't know that these are separate places in space. As far as the universe is concerned, as far as the qubits are concerned, these two places have the same identity, they have the same location. There's no difference in their quantum state, and there's no difference in their surrounding quantum state. So these two diaphragms, as far as the universe is concerned, exist in exactly the same place. They have the same probability location. And when a ship just goes sailing through one diagram, it appears on the other side, because as far as the universe is concerned, there is no distance between these two things. You're not traveling through space-time. You're not building a tunnel through space-time. You're not pushing through space-time. Space-time is like jelly. It's like it's real. But as far as quantum is concerned, there is no distance. There's no distance between these two diaphragms. As far as the universe can tell, they're exactly the same location, because all of the elements in them are perfectly matched. Now, if you had that, without all that tedious mucking about in hyperspace, there is no hyperspace. You're telling the qubits that make reality, they make reality every Planck time. You're telling the qubits that these two diaphragms have the same location. You're not folding paper. You're not collapsing space-time. As far as the universe is concerned, it's the same exact place. And by sailing through there, just using Newtonian momentum to sail through this thing, you go from location A to location B because inside those gates there is only location Q, the quantum location. They're identical. They're absolutely identical. And in order to do this, you have to do it very, very quickly because these the quantum states will start to react to the other qubits around them, and then they'll start to recognize these are different parts of space. But for the length of time that you hit them with these lasers, let's say I don't know, 100th of a second, something like that. The universe is the same on those two diaphragms, and it doesn't take insane amounts of energy. It just takes enough energy to power the lasers to spin up these hydrogen atoms to have the same quantum identity. So why can't you just do that from point A to point B? Why can't you just have that at Alpha Centauri and Earth and just go from one to the other? Or for that matter, why can't you go from the gate at Earth? If you went out in a slower than light ship and built one in Andromeda, why can't you go to Andromeda? Well, technically, theoretically, you could, but what exists in the world is what's called a quantum fingerprint. So the qubits, the underlying probability pixels that create reality, know that the Earth system, the sun, is in a surrounding web of ever-expanding qubits, and it knows what all of these probabilities are next to it. So it's got a probability fingerprint, right? The sun is most likely to be here because this is where it is relative to all these other things. And let's say you go out 1 light year and you have a similar probability fingerprint. But the further away you get from Earth, the more different that probability fingerprint becomes, because all of the qubits are creating all the rest of this universe, and the farther away you go, the less similar these two places are. And the less similar they are, the more difficult it is to convince the universe that they are in the same place. So there is a neighborhood of probability space. And for the sake of the argument, again, we'll come up with some number like 0.73 light years or whatever. But our ability, and this is a term I love, yes, it works going in reverse. Our technological ability is about a 1 light year radius, because that's the limit of our error correction. That's a great term. More than 1 light year away, during that instantaneous pulse, nearly instantaneous pulse, when everything has to get through that gate at one time, which is why the ships have to be moving really, really fast, we can fool the universe into thinking these two things are the same because their probability fingerprints are similar. The further away one gets from the other, the less similar they become. I came up with this, working with Grok. Okay, so two things that are in relatively same part of the neighborhood have a very high probability fingerprint that's very similar to each other, and for a few microseconds you can fuse these things together. Okay, so now we're not talking about wormholes. Now we're talking about spheres. We're talking about spheres of probability fingerprints, right? And so these spheres overlap each other. Now it gets really, really kind of cool. The best way to think about this is not as a sphere, because it's not a sphere. It's not a shell. It's not like you have to put the two shells together so you can join them up. It's a likelihood. So the further away you make these things, the more error there will be in the process. And the closer you make these things, the less error there will be in the process. So, and the technology will advance. So like a Mark I station might have a 0.4 light year ability. And then as you get better with the technology, your error correction software, your ability to keep those hydrogen atoms in the same state, maybe now you can go out to 0.6 light years. But there is a limit. And so it's a heat map. It's not a Venn diagram. In fact, it's actually kind of the opposite of a Venn diagram, because a Venn diagram has a hard edge. There is no hard edge to the limit of this. It's just that as you get further and further away, the likelihood of error increases, and it increases by the cube. So once you start getting further and further away from the so-called range of these things, the chance that you can do it is still there, but it becomes less and less likely that you can maintain that state in an error-free for the length of time you need to get a ship through there. Okay? So instead of thinking them as wormhole tubes that are connected, they're essentially just like strings of pearls on a line. And what's great about that is you're dealing with, since it's a heat map, closer, and as you get further away, less and less and less. Now you can start saying things like, how much risk are you willing to take? In other words, the longer the distance between these two things, right, the quicker you can make this, I almost said jump, the quicker you can go from point A to point B. And so what if you really stretched it out? Well, the farther you stretch it, the more errors are likely to fall into the system. And if you have enough errors, then it will decohere and it won't work. So what I'm really saying is, you've got economics saying we want as few of these stations as possible because they're expensive. But you also have safety. So within a certain radius, you are highly confident of your ability to pull this off for 10 milliseconds, right? At 1 light year, you are highly confident that if you can get this ship through there in 20 milliseconds or whatever, right, that you will essentially be able to error correct that and have an extremely high level of probability. And so I'm going to look at what the probability is, but for me, the standard of safety is about the level of commercial airline flight in 2025, which means almost no errors. Right? The chance of you being on a plane that crashes is as close to zero as it really can be. Okay? But what happens if you're not as obsessed with safety? What if you're more concerned about economics? What if you're more concerned about wartime or whatever? What if you want to separate these things by a greater distance so you don't need so many of them, you don't spend so much money, but they get riskier? Most everybody watching this show now would be perfectly willing to get on a commercial jetliner because there's a certain amount of safety that's built into the system as it exists now. Would you get on a jetliner tomorrow if the risk of a crash was 10 times greater than it is today? I absolutely would, because the risk is so low. What if it was 100 times greater? Yes. If it was 1,000 times greater, now I'm going to start thinking about things. What if it's 10,000 times greater? And so on and so on and so on. Now you have to start weighing these things in terms of risk. And so the term that we would use in show would be, this is a hot line. A cold line is very safe. The overlap distance is relatively small. The quantum fingerprints between the two places are small. Our level of safety is extremely high. But what if you're the Chinese, let's say, and you don't have that same level of respect for human life, because they clearly don't? What if you want to save money and put them further away and increase the risk of a problem due to error correction? How much risk are you willing to take? Would you get on an airliner that had a 1% chance of crashing? I don't think many rational people would get on an airliner that had a 1% chance of crashing, because, with 50,000 flights a day, that's 50, 60 airliners going down, or 500, I don't even know what the number is, but you get the idea. But would you take a ride on a Falcon to the space station if you had a 1% risk of dying? I'd take that chance in a heartbeat. And so you have to ask about risk. Roadrunner says Chinese may not worry about the risk of human lives, but would they risk the spacecraft? Well, I think it's a question. What about the military? If you're on a military mission, how much risk are you willing to accept? How much risk would you entail? The longer you keep that thing open, the more errors that creep into the system on a cube. The further away they get from this optimum distance, the more error correction there is on a cube. Over time, technology gets better. AI computing and the lasing and all of the other stuff that's doing the error correction to keep that moment in time together gets better. But how much risk are you willing to take? And I just find that to be really an interesting question. And so you could have guys saying, no, there's no way I'm going out there to the Epsilon Indy Spur. That is a hot line, man. I'm not doing it. And there's another thing in here that's cool. Let's say you have a line from Earth to Alpha Centauri. And let's say there are 7 probability stations along the way to make that happen. Okay, so you've got a line, and this is a very cold line. It's got a very high level of safety, and you've got 7 of these stations. But what happens if something happens on station 4? Okay, station 4 for some reason or another is suboptimal. Maybe they've taken some kind of damage, or maybe the quality of their hydrogen is low, or they're having a complete power failure, whatever. What if station 4 on that line is suboptimal? Well, now the entire line has to assume the level of risk of its weakest link. What if you have one station that is underperforming? It degrades the line, because this may be 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%, 60%, 100%, 100%, 100%. That's a 60% chance on that line. That's an interesting issue. You've got constant worries about maintenance, error correction. You've got all of this stuff. But at any given time, the safety of that transit from one star to another, however many stations there are, is going to be dependent on the least reliable station. And all of this stuff gets really, really interesting too. So I really like that a lot. Let me give you some terms. Yes, significant digits. Exactly right, Parkinson. Pantarchin. Significant figures. So here's some terms that I came up with working this out with ChatGPT. So I'll just read you a couple of these, and then we'll get on to our questions. So these things are spheres of probability, and that inside this radius, the quantum fingerprints of the 2 locations in space-time are similar enough that for 20 milliseconds, we can spin the qubits to make them believe that they're the same place. All right. So these are spheres of probability that go out in all different directions. So what a sphere really is in this model, in our terms, each sphere around a station is the region of informational space within which that station can force another region to share a matching probability fingerprint. Informationally, that's called the coherence horizon. Nobody's ever used these terms in science fiction before. Nobody has ever used these terms before. And these coherent horizons will vary based on where they are in real space. You may have an area that, for whatever reason, is got, it's closer to a larger gravity source or whatever. It's just like the coherence horizon is a little bit shorter here. So anyway, and then just some rough ideas of how characters might talk. Engineers might say, our station has a coherence radius of about 0.4 light years in this sector. Physicists would say, meaning the information layer still lets us switch probability. Got a kind of a little confusion about all this other stuff. Here's some in-universe lines you can actually use. A senior physicist to a junior officer. Our business isn't defeating distance. Distance never exists. Distant doesn't exist. Our business is bullying the information layer into pretending two very different regions are in the same place. And the further apart they are in informational terms, the more it fights back. I like the sound of that a lot. First generation stations could only lock into neighbors with almost identical probability fingerprints. We call that the tight coherence era. These days, that would be the Mark I stations. These days, we fly Mark IV webs. Lots more qubits, much heavier shielding, obscene error correction stacks, same laws of physics, just a much bigger shove. Politicians trying to get past a safe margin. Theory says there's a hard divergence wall out there somewhere, meaning like a hard shell. But theory also said that we never break the sound barrier, so build me the station. Here are some terms in the lexicon that engineers can use or that the ship captains can use. We'll find out where they belong. These are just terms that we'll throw out. Coherence load is how hard is the gate working. The divergence margin, how close are you to the limit where these things can't connect anymore. What's the QEC depth? That would be the quantum error correction layers. Lock stability, what is the gate's grip on the paired region? How secure is that connection? Informational terrain, what's the weather along the corridor? What is the variables of gravity and all these manifolds of gravity and all the rest of it? Horizon creep, that's when a region's divergence is increasing over time. Informational terrain, quiet band or storm band, these are regions where the errors are either low or high. And threshold collapse would be catastrophic gate failure. And here's some other terms you get. A risk gradient profile, a safe divergence envelope, delta risk curve, gradient limit operations, frontier gradient index, gradient pressure, gradient creep, gradient burst, and gradient induced decoherence. No one is talking like this. No one. Here's some examples. Sol station has a shallow gradient. It's easiest in the network. Tau Ceti is stable, but the gradient spikes on the far side. That's why the Chinese arm swings to the north. Frontier Station 9 sits right on the gradient wall. Every captain knows it. Beta 61 was built past the gradient knee, and it still scares me. So that station is farther away than it should be. Colonists could complain, why do we get the routes in the yellow zone? Why do we get yellow routes? It's because they cheaped out on the stations. Corporations cut corners. We can shave 3 stations off the corridor if we operate at a 0.85 gradient load. Admirals push the limits in wartime. Run it hot. Push through the gradient wall. Scientists warn every time you operate outside the safe gradient envelope, the error load compounds exponentially. And I'm just, this is the last one, and then we're all done. We'll go to the questions. This risk gradient, right? The distance that you can safely error correct the qubits into thinking they're the same place. Risk gradient isn't arbitrary. It naturally emerges from informational divergence, decoherence pressure, entanglement loss, error correction load, stability thresholds, and probability pattern mismatch. And he goes on to say, ChatGPT says, this is not fiction, it's not magic, it is a coherent extension of your physics. So, I think that this is going to blow people's minds. I just think it's going to blow their minds. Because to me, and I've studied this my entire life, certainly since I was 10. So I've spent, at the very least, I've spent 50 years with a lot of brain cycles on this problem, and that is, how do you travel faster than light? You don't. You don't travel at all. Well, you travel from one side of the station diaphragm to the other, but the station diaphragms are in the same place. You're not traveling. You're not going from here to there. You're not crossing through space-time. You're not drilling a hole in space-time. What you've done is you've convinced the universe for 20,000ths of a second that these two places are the same place. You've convinced the qubits, and the only energy it takes you is the energy to power a laser to excite these atoms into an identical quantum state because they're entangled. But you don't have to bore a hole or keep a wormhole open or move a warp through space. It's completely achievable. And I just think it's freaking phenomenal, man. And this is becoming more real every day. I really like the idea that we have to use 21st century physics. And I love the idea of them having a kind of contempt for that 150-year period in history when we thought that it was not possible to go from point A to point B faster than light can. See, I almost said travel from point A to point B, but this is the kind of thing that I've got to bleed out of the script. We're not traveling from point A to point B. Point A and point B are the same point. We're not traveling between the two. We are entering a set of of ionized hydrogen atoms, a diaphragm of them, in which point A and point B are the same point. We're faking out the universe. I think of a word for this. What are we doing? We're fooling you. And if you want to get philosophical, you could say it's a cheat code. It's a cheat code in the structure of the universe. If you believe the universe is a simulation, well, this is a cheat code. But basically, you don't have to believe in simulation theory. This is just how reality works. Once you understand that the qubits create space-time and everything else based on probability, then space-time is no longer a problem. Now it's the information substrate that's the problem. And if you can convince the information substrate that A and B have the same location, then for that 21 thousandths of a second, it will be the same location. It will create it every single frame of Planck time. And have a nice trip. Yeah, transversing the diagram. These are probability stations. And yeah, so I think that's pretty cool. B-Fire says, what happens to a ship if a gate fails? I haven't thought about that much. I guess it would depend if the failure was more or less instantaneous. One part of it is, my first take on it would be that half of the ship ends up at station B and the other half just goes through station A. But if it didn't fail instantly, which it seems like it wouldn't, then basically what would happen is that the errors would spread over time, and probably the ship would be dispersed to all of the regions in between them as it would decohere. Yeah, that's a better answer. What would happen to the ship? Well, if half of the ship got through and then the gate failed, then the first half of the ship comes out on the other end, and the second half of the ship is decohered all along the line between the two radii of these two stations. You just ship turns into quantum foam. Yeah, well, it turns into, atoms that are spread out over, 4/10 of a light year or whatever. That's awesome. It's just great. I just love it. I'm just so happy with it. I just think this is fantastic. And when people see this, hard science fiction fans see this, they're gonna, you would want to close, you're absolutely right. Roadrunner says, you would definitely want to close all bulkhead doors before that transition. Yes, because, and the reverse would be true too. If your ship was ahead of the malfunction, the front of the ship would get the front of the ship would appear at station B, and the back of the ship would decohere. But if it failed the other way, the front of the ship would decohere, and by the time that the failure had happened, the back of the ship would just go through the gate A, would never arrive at B. It would go through station A intact, because the failure happened so fast that the front of the ship decoheres, at which point everything just goes away, and then the second half of the ship just sails right through gate A, and it's lost, the front half of it, and whoever was on board and that kind of thing. So, whoopie-doo, it's cool. It's really, really cool. So the error correction goes up as the cube of the distance and also as the cube of the amount of time that this thing is open. So the shorter the time, the better, and the shorter the distance, the better. Anyway, I think that's freaking great. All right, let's go ahead and take some questions here. So let's see what we got. Bada bing. And it's going to look cool. Marky Mod says, what's the depth of the qubit area? Because all ships need to be encompassed at exactly the same time, surely. I cannot move forwards because the momentum puts the front ship forward in time or whatever. So basically what happens is all of these ships that are going to go through these gates, and these gates aren't firing on the hour, by the way. These things only fire relatively infrequently. So all of these ships that are going to make this particular, I almost said jump, but we got to think of a new term for this. Transit implies distance. Event. They all start out in a funnel, and then they get closer and closer. They match their speeds, and as they reach a certain threshold, the station's AI takes over. And there's a really cool little bit of a business in there that I wrote where the station takes over as it's blending these things together, and the station does a quick firing of all of the attitude control thrusters on your ship because it wants to know exactly how maneuverable it is. And you could get something like, with this kind of this, tramp merchant thing, it's like it does all these little tests and it's measuring. You don't have to do big motions, just measuring how effective the control of the ship is. And they could say, looks like your number 6 thruster is running, is running real cold. And they're only a few light seconds away at this point. And the guys on the ship say, is it within tolerance? And the guy says, yeah, it's within tolerance, but barely. I'd get that looked at if I were you. Okay, we'll get on that. It's like, oh God, where are we going to find the money for this? So as these get closer and closer to that gate, and all of this has to be absolutely timed all across the distance, as these things get closer and closer, what you're trying to do is you're trying to squeeze all of these ships into the smallest possible sphere. And that means incredible visuals where you're looking out the window and there's just like, let's say you're in a tiny little ship and they're putting you in between, the front centrifuge, which is stop spinning, and the back of the fuel tanks. You just and you're looking out there and you're seeing all these other ships are just slowly coming together, and they're coming together and coming together, and then you're all in this super tight formation, and you're still 10 minutes out or an hour out or whatever from the transit time. And as you get closer and closer, this clock is counting down. You get closer and closer. You see this gate, and this thing happens fast. So it's like whoop, and then you're 0.7 light years away. Forward of you, several miles or 100 miles in the distance or 1,000, whatever, is the second connecting station, which connects to the next one. And the reason you have to have these distance between the two is that certain kinds of ships have to be able to break off at gate 1 and decelerate and get them more paired hydrogen and supplies and all the rest of it. And then one peels off at station 2 and station 3 and so on. And I might do it that way, or I might do a series of smaller things called a pig line. The pig line would be much smaller neck, but I don't know about that. In any event, you get the idea. So, yeah, I think it's great. And if it turns out that this really happens this way, then it's better than the Epstein drive. The guy's he just bought a spaceship and he's just tooling around. He's not an engineer. It's not a research station. It's not cost billions of, I'm talking about the Expanse. It's not cost billions of dollars or trillions of dollars and been working on this forever. No, it's just some guy who picked up a spaceship and tinkered around with something, and the next thing you know, he's got this essentially limitless sublight drive. That's just okay. Although I do have to admit, I did like the fact that the acceleration was so great that it killed him, and because he couldn't reach the controls. But this kind, I was just tinkering around, and I invented essentially limitless specific impulse on these things. All right, this doesn't work that way. All right, here we go. Thank you, Eric, for curating these things here. So let's see what we got. We got an Eric Blake. We got a Marusha Dark. We got a Braden Higby. We got a Roadrunner. We got a Capital G Geek. We got a Marusha. We got an Eric Blake. I think we can do all those because we missed him last time. All right, here we go. Eric Blake. Tonight, the case of the complicated cool. Hey, Bill, one of your best go-to mini monologues is the one about how the left shouldn't be the cool kids, as we're the ones who believe in loud guns, fast cars, and Sydney Sweeney. Well, a few weeks ago, I saw a Twitter X thread about this very subject, us being the cool kids now due to the left ceding the role over the completely uncool wokeness, and frankly, it's genius. Here's the thread if you want to check out the details. Okay. I'll take a look at that later. In a nutshell, the thread's point is that our side is in a serious cultural pickle here. For the simple reason that we're only the cool kids now by default. The left is so totally uncool now, and we're just either default other option. Couldn't agree more, and that's why we're doing the colonies to try to fix this. In short, we didn't earn it. We didn't do the work to become culturally cool, and as such, we don't really know how to handle it. As the thread notes, we've been used to being the hall monitors for decades, and let's be honest, hall monitors aren't cool, but we're addicted to it, stuck on complaining, wagging fingers, X franchise is dead, yada, yada, yada. So looking at this issue, how do we break this addiction? Because cool by default can only be maintained for so long. Well, here's why. Dalton says, how do we submit questions? Dalton, members at BillWhittle.com are the only ones who get to submit questions in the forum at BillWhittle.com. It's one of the few things that we do for the members. They have been paying money to make sure that the message gets out there, and they've just been terrific. So, look, it's pretty clear by now that virtually all of my brain cycles are applied to one thing, so let me just put that where that is. I think the colonies are going to be cool. And look, this is a museum of Star Trek. The influence that Star Wars had on the culture before they destroyed it, it's a big deal. But what's going to make the colonies, I think, cool to young people is not the visuals, it's not the realism, it's not the 21st century science. I think what's going to make it cool is it's going to be based on reality. What that means is, here, let me just do a quick bit of research here. Grok, can you give me a breakdown of commercial pilots by sex and race? Boy, it's okay. Currently, right now in the U.S., commercial airline pilots are 90% men and 90.4% men and 9.6% female. So we're going to see probably 1 in 10 pilots in the colony are going to be women. By race, white is 88.3%, black is 4.4%, Asian is 2.7%, and other races are about 4.6%, which means that the huge majority of pilots in the colonies are going to be white males. It's the white males who've had the living crap beaten out of them in Gen Z from the day they were born and have been told that they're idiots and that they're appendages, and where would we be without women to tell them what to do and so on. So 9 out of 10 are going to be men, and probably 95 of them are going to be white. Let me see that number. Yeah. And when people give me crap about this, because they're going to, how come there's so many white people in your show? How come there's so many white men doing all the highly technical stuff? I'm just going to say, hey, I just made flip answer will be because we're trying to be realistic. The second answer will be that this is what the pilot population looks like. That's what the pilot population looks like. We've had 50 years of that door being open to minorities and to women, and we've had at least 10 years where the door's not only open, the only people they're letting in are non-whites and women, and this is still what the thing looks like, because for reasons that I do not fully understand, flying is a white male passion as a general rule. It just is. And this is something that is really interesting to me. And I'll tell you who else is this way. So the reason that the colonies are going to be, I think, going to be cool for at least for young men is the era of the girl boss is over. That doesn't mean that there are not capable pilots, and it doesn't mean that there are not capable female officers. It just means that they are going to appear with the frequency that you just saw. And just to see that it's going to look so retro. It's just going to look so retro. But this is the appeal of guys like Nick Fuentes. He's speaking the truth about things, and he's told that he can't say those kind of things, right? So, okay, so this is, I didn't ask for active duty. I asked for combat troops. Okay, so in terms of, this is for the military, in terms of totals, 82% male, 17% female, 68% white, 17% black, 6% multiracial, 3% Asian, and so on. But let's get into combat, because that's what I'm interested in. Combat troops, in the combat infantry, females make up approximately 1.4%. In armor, they make up apparently 3%. Field artillery is 8 to 10%. Army total for combat troops is about 3% women. In the Marine Corps, it is 0.5% for infantry and 2% overall. Those are the total number of people who are exposed to combat. Total women in Army combat arms is about 4%. In the Marine Corps, total women in combat arms is about 1.6%. Attrition rates for women in training remain higher. It's 49% of the females attrit out in the Army versus 18% of the males. And so on. So, this is the stuff that I can't stand about not only modern science fiction, but modern writing, is the is the illusion of the female warrior. There just aren't any. There aren't any. And that's going to make the young men feel good. And I think also it's going to make the young women feel good. Because in this future, the men are going to be protecting the women. And they're not going to be treated like dog crap over it either. They're going to look back on the early 21st century as a time of just insanity. Feminism goes out the window. Feminism disappears the moment that there is existential threat, fatal threat to everybody in the population. The second that it's possible for anybody to be killed by violence or by any kind of hardship, feminism just disappears. And that absence of feminism is going to make this show cool. It just is. Rusha Dark. Topic, the gift that keeps on giving. Before I get to my real question, here's some more entertainment. You may recall the White House ballroom page included public shaming of Clinton, Obama, and Biden. Well, now has a page dedicated to the Media Hall of Shame, complete with an animated leaderboard calling out the worst of fake news hoaxes. The DHS also tweeted out, "You're going ho ho home. Enjoy." Yeah, that's cool. Okay. Here's the topic. Like a prayer. Do you pray, Bill Whittle? They say that prayer is talking to God while meditation is listening for a reply. I once saw this movie called Happy, Thank You, More Please that taught me what I consider to be a really great prayer. I often tell the Spirit, happy, thank you, more please, when things are going well in my life. Fitting since we just passed Thanksgiving. Another one I've taken up recently is my prayer, your schedule, to teach me trust and patience, like that lesson from Evan Almighty about when people pray for something, God gives them an opportunity as opposed to just giving them the thing directly. For what do you pray and in what manner? On a somewhat related note, did you know that the only prayer Christ ever taught his disciples, the so-called Lord's Prayer, is actually a map of the 7 chakras? This is also mapped out in the Tree of Life from the Jewish Kabbalah and the Jewish Menorah and Temple, another example of East and West uniting. Well, I do pray, but I certainly don't pray frequently. I'm just going to come out and say this. The reason, when I put it as plainly and as truthfully as I can, I understand in my head that this is backwards. I completely get it. But in my heart, I don't pray nearly as often because I don't want to be a pest, and I don't want to be a supplicant who is looking for investment advice or, hey, can you do this for me? I'd really appreciate it. There have been some tough times when I've prayed for help, but most of the time when I pray, it's like a lightning bolt that just strikes me like you need to, and it's almost always moments of deep appreciation. When I find something, when I just wake up out of the sleepwalking state that most of us are in, and I just realize just how wonderful and lucky I am. I just, last time I prayed, I just got down on my knees in front of the kitchen sink, to be honest with you, and thank God for, I remember what it was, Bean had in his last days, it looked like he was going to go like that night, and I thought for sure I'd have to take him to the vet if he survived the night the next morning. And when I woke up, he came trotting into the room and jumped up on the bed and seemed to be much better. And that lasted for about 2 or 3 days. And when it was clear that I never expected it was a miraculous thing, but when it was clear that he was heading back and worse than he was before, I just got down on my knees and just thanked God for having those 2 or 3 days. I thought it was um, an extremely generous uh, gift to give me that time back, uh, which I wasn't expecting, and I was very, very grateful. Eric Blake says, Bill be like, I don't want to pester you, God. God be like, oh, get over yourself, son. I've dealt with much worse pestering than yours. Um, so virtually all of my prayers are gratitude prayers, and I don't do bargaining. Um, I certainly don't do the if you'll do this for me, I'll do that for you. Uh, I the kind of thing that does make me pray is to be is to be used according to God's will, and that what I'm working on, I don't pray for the success of what I'm working on. I pray that it's what I'm here for, that I'm acting in accordance with my gifts to produce as much good as I can, and I hope I'm on the right path. And if I don't, and if I'm not, please let me know. Um, so, uh, you know, that's it. I know people who pray every day, and I'm certainly not one of those people. Uh, and I know a lot of people who, for example, just saying grace is a prayer of gratitude all the time, which I think is appropriate and good. I'm just, I don't know. But the one thing that I find distasteful about a certain kind of prayer, as I said, is the kind of the bargaining thing. Um, you know, God, if you'll do this for me, then I promise I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this. And it's like, no, for me, it's mostly just moments of gratitude when I wake up. Now would be a good time, maybe after the show, and just you know, a realization and a desire to be worthy. You know, a desire to be uh, better. And one of the reasons I think I've been so fired up about this is that I've been, you know, I mean, Jeremy asked me to write the colonies 2 years ago, and I said, I can't do that right now, man. I got to do this, you know, got to do the Frank Luke thing first, and I just hadn't been hit by the lightning bolt yet. But I'm just, I just feel like I'm on the right path here, and and I think that this has the ability to really make a significant impact on the culture from which politics is downstream. So we'll see. Thank you very much for that, Matt. The Riley McLean Wilkinson. You are, Bill. I'm no priest. Technically, I am according to my faith, but I'm a drunkard too. Anyway, Bill, you do a lot of good work. Thank you, guys, and I appreciate it. And so much of it is due to you know, the wonderful people here. Was at the funeral for the person I talked about, whose son died. I thought he was 56. He was 46, and Jeremy flew in. I got to see John Voight again. I'm going to have lunch with him this week. I hadn't seen John in a while. And I saw my friend who was obviously, you know, had to carry his son in a box. It's not fun. But there was the first part of the ceremony was in the chapel, Jewish wedding, Jewish funeral rather. And the second part was out at the gravesite. And I've never been to a funeral that had a gravesite before. Most of the ones I go to are, you know, like memorial services for people who are cremated or whatever. But I was standing at the back of this crowd right next to Jeremy, and there was probably 100 people there. And I just whispered to him, I said, you know, man, I think the measure of your life is one measure of your life is not just how many people come to your funeral, but the quality of the people that come to your funeral. And he said, yeah. And I said, and if that's the case, man, you are effed. So there you go. Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you, Conductor Productions. It's good to see a new face there. So that, yeah, that's basically it, I guess. Yeah, Jeremy's going to be 6 people, and most of them are going to be paid mourners. All right, Braden Higby, howdy from Idaho. Hello, Idaho. I'm really looking forward to the colonies and the wider universe it will spawn. I played the Christmas DLC of Borderlands 4 with my brother the other day, and the devs couldn't figure out if they wanted the bad guy to be a Scrooge knockoff or a parody of a straw man of a conservative Christian. I'm really looking forward to property that doesn't actively hate my guts. Yeah, me too. That said, have you thought about the impacts of AI on video games? I'm thinking you could finally do procedurally generated worlds, but actually fill them in with procedurally generated NPCs with generated dialogue and requests and quests. You could get a massive open world universe without it feeling empty and boring like Starfield and No Man's Sky did. I have given some thoughts, a lot of thoughts, well, not a lot of thought, to the video game aspect of this. I think the phase 1 of the video game aspect would be something that would allow you to basically travel through the in-game universe, and that we would have on our website updates. Basically would be like any other update, once the we go through can't do this every day, obviously, but people are constantly adding, world building and lore, and on this planet here's a colony here, and this is what it looks like, and all this other stuff. So we issue a new update, people would download the update. Now they'd be able to fly to places they could have flown before, but there's more detail there, or there's more structures there, or whatever the case may be. I've watched Star Citizen spend $1 billion trying to make this work as one universe. I think certainly think there should be a sandbox, an open sandbox where anybody can go, and they've got a ship of whatever kind, and they can tool around and do all these other things. Although, with realistic travel times, that creates an enormous gameplay problem. We can't accelerate time because then we get out of sync with the real world universe, and it takes a special kind of player to, commit to an 11-day journey between 2 planets. I don't really know how to solve that problem just yet. Part of me is thinking, oh, you could command a ship and send a ship on its way, but then you'd also have like a sort of a god mode where you can just sort of travel around and look at everything else that's in motion. It's not going to be a bestseller because I think for this game to be realistic, it would have to essentially be synced to the real world colonies clock. So, I think you should be able to jump into any one of these ships, and be nice to be able to walk around these ships or float around these ships, as the case may be. And maybe the answer is for you to have, eventually you work your way up and you buy 5 or 6 different ships, so you've always got something in motion, and, you could let the autopilot put the thing into orbit and dock with the station, and you could do the economics. That brings up the question of what happens if you get attacked by a player character while you're not at the machine. I don't know. But clearly, something that would allow you to navigate through the universe and see almost the exact same realism as there would be in the show. For example, in Star Engine, the planets are in the right place. All of the physics is correct, temperatures are correct, the maps are relatively basic. I'm almost, in fact, in fact, I know that we can set things up so that you can have those planets look much, much more realistic. In terms of things to do on the ship, um, you know, you really, I think probably the best way to think about it is, um, what would you do on a um, if let's say you were going to do an ocean liner sim, uh, I don't know. There is a kind of a stand back thing where you're you know more like a real time strategy game where you're doing trading and planning and and all this other stuff. But I think the most important thing is the ability for a person maybe to get outside their ship and just view everything, and then they can determine where they want their ship to go. Um, and then to be perfectly honest with you, I can't really answer this yet because I have to figure out what the travel times are. As it turns out, the travel times are relatively short in the solar system if you do um, if you posit that there's enough that the engines are efficient enough to do what they do in uh, the Expanse, and that is a full acceleration burn to midpoint, and then a turnaround. So let me just check a travel time here. Um, Hang on, I'm just getting some numbers. So here's what I just typed in. Grok assume a constant 1g acceleration to midpoint and then 1g deceleration from there. Um, what would be the minimum and maximum travel times based on the positions of Earth to Jupiter? So the Earth and Jupiter are constantly changing position. Thank you very much, Matt. Have a great night and Merry Christmas. And I'm sure we'll see you before then. But you've been wonderful and really appreciate it. So in the solar system, if you did a 1G burn to halfway and decelerated, what would be the shortest time it would be able to get to Jupiter and the longest time based on the orbital configurations? And the nice thing about using something like Space Engine is this can all actually happen in real time. I mean, if you set the year at 2270, the Earth and Jupiter will be in the exact same position, and all the procedural planets generated out there will be in the same sort of thing here. Grok is taking a long time to think because it's doing a lot of searching the web, and it didn't do this before. I know I can set it to fast or something. Okay, you know what? I am going to set it to fast because this is just ridiculous. Just give me a quick answer. It says 41 days to Jupiter. That seems longer than I would have thought. "41 days. That's just a lot longer than I thought. Uh, about it? 5G, military mission, let's say. The guys are in a tank or something. 19 days. I, I thought Mars was like a day away at 1G acceleration. Anyway, it's an ocean liner trip, and I got to be thinking along those lines. All right, so back to the question. That said, have you thought about the impacts of AI on video games? I'm thinking you could finally do procedurally generated worlds, but actually fill them with procedurally generated NPCs with generated dialogue and quests. You could get a massive open world universe without it feeling empty and boring like Starfield and No Man's Skies did. Yes, that is on the technological horizon range, probably in about 2 to 3 years. The problem with AI video is that it is extremely realistic looking because it's dealing with billions of flat two-dimensional images. The gold standard for this is when you can upload three-dimensional objects into this and then have it place them in the same sort of rendering database that it gets its images out of. Right now, I would be perfectly happy to have good CGI quality level stuff. The stuff on, Star Citizen is, what, 12 years old now? 13? And it's definitely not cutting edge graphics, but certainly good enough. The on the planet stuff, it was 2017 when I stopped playing, which is damn near 10 years ago. It's 8 years ago. But even 8 years ago, sitting in a rover with a friend of mine, just driving over the surface of this planet, watching this gas giant, rise as the night went by, was just epic, man. It was absolutely fantastic. So the video game's going to take a lot of work, and one of the things we're going to do when we get the money together for the first pitch is we will have a video game section, and we're going to start breaking out into teams and getting things organized. I got some offers for people already to help me get this thing organized, so there will be a video game kind of committee or team that'll be looking into possibilities and and going out further and checking on what people would be willing to play or not play, or whatever the case may be. There may be a world where, since space combat would be so unlikely, there may be something that would be akin to Arena Commander, where you would play against either the AI, or you could have 2 or 5 or 10 humans or whatever who agree to enter this battle space, which is essentially independent from the real-time, real world out there. Although space battles in the real universe would be possible, but it's a little tricky. However, something like Arena Commander in Star Citizen, where you can just get into your ship and just go and just have space combat, I think is a pretty good halfway solution right there. So there you go. But there's a lot more to be done on that, so we're looking at it. Roadrunner, greetings, friend Bill. Hey, Roadrunner. Just a quick suggestion. I enjoy rewatching the videos you have posted to the YouTube Stratosphere Studios channel. I've literally watched A Bumpy Ride Home dozens of times. Me too, bless your heart. Since one of your goals is to drive more traffic to your website, my suggestion is to add a brief 5-second or so reference to your website at the end of every video you upload in the future, more at BillWhittle.com or presented by BillWhittle.com, or anything that the viewers can use to find your site. I feel like that kid on a tricycle in The Incredibles when Mr. Incredible asks him, "What are you waiting for?" And the kid answers, "I don't know, something amazing, I guess." So thank you for amazing us. You're welcome. P.S. After watching A Bumpy Ride Home for about the 40th time, I finally realized one of the reasons I loved that video. Every one of the people in the video is a steely-eyed missile man or steely-eyed missile woman in a couple clips. I guess there are no dilettantes in space. Yes. They're steely-eyed missile men, not steely-eyed rocket men. Yes. That was the entire prompt. Was to say that these guys were concerned but in control. They are not in a panic. They're not freaking out. They're they're operating at their maximums. Um, and as far as the BillWhittle.com thing goes, I'm gonna. One of the things we're going to be doing with this initial money, the tier zero people coming in prior to the money raised for the first pilot episode, is a completely separate web presence for the colonies. BillWhittle.com will always be the backdoor, and I think BillWhittle.com members get stuff ahead of anybody else on the colonies. But the colonies has got to have its own ground up website that doesn't have our problems with having two different payment systems and all of the code that we had to bring with us and stuff. It's going to be a clean sheet of paper. It's going to have a robust merchandise store. It'll have it'll obviously have a members only section that would apply to investors, and it would take care of all of that stuff. So the reason I haven't promoted that or to futures or any of the other stuff is because I'm keeping this. I'm not keeping it under my hat, but I'm not promoting it yet. There will come a time when it will be time to promote it. But for example, one of many things that need to be done. I've got a really excellent friend that I've known since I was in college who is a great graphic designer. And so the whole thing's going to need a graphic design treatment. It's going to need a logo. It's going to need fonts, and then we will build a colony's website and all of that. So yes, that will all be there. And Stratosphere Studios, I thought was maybe going to do that, but it's, I just test things on Stratosphere Studios website. I haven't really promoted that either because, again, but yes, the whole thing is to stay focused on the brand and brand. And as soon as we get this initial 7 founding fathers in there, we will get that website up, and then we can really start building some momentum. I would really like to see A Bumpy Ride Home spread wide, put a little money behind it, because I'd like to see how many views it does. I've seen a lot of AI videos and stuff. I've never seen anything I liked as much as that. So the time for that is when everything else, the substrate is in place, and that would be all of the branding stuff. Yeah, and lots of merch and cool things like that. One of the potential areas for merchandise, and I have to say Star Citizen has done this pretty well, and that is with the various corporations in the future. Corporate logos and T-shirts that look like they're part of the corporations that you build up in game, or the political units or whatever. Star Citizen has, they've got T-shirts for Origin and Drake and RSI and all that stuff, and people have their own favorite brands, and so that's all part of the world building and the lore. Is these? That's a major part of it. Is the corporations, the mega corporations, and maybe some of them are not so mega. Maybe it's Johnson's Cargo and Delivery Service. They have a small interplanetary craft. An interplanetary craft is an interstellar craft in the world of quantum mechanics. Although there are in fact dedicated interstellar craft, because you cannot build a gate to nowhere, a station rather to nowhere. There has to be huge interstellar capable sublight ships that are moving at 70% of the speed of light, 80% of the speed of light, and extending these probability routes as they go. So the thing is going, for the sake of the argument, the first one goes from Earth to Alpha Centauri. So, it accelerates to, 70% of the speed of light, coasts, and then every 0.5 light years or whatever, this module detaches, decelerates, and constructs the station out of that. And the first station can be just a tiny little station, because if you make a tiny little station, you can send the materials through it, and from there you can build the bigger materials, the bigger stations. So, and if you keep that in line, that could be the pig line I talked about, where that's where supplies resupply, and by the way, all of the timing that has to happen. We know the gate's going to fire this way, and then we know it's going to fire the other way. When? Well, it's got to be timed to the millisecond, and that data has to travel to all of these gates, and that's fine because the stations are separated in real space by a very small distance, 50 miles or whatever. And during that time, when the little information pig comes through, it just broadcasts, it syncs up. Here's when the next sequence. Just a data broadcast. I call it the pig line because in oil, isn't it true in oil pipelines? If you want to pump diesel from one place to another, I'm not sure this exact example works, but if you want to pump diesel from one place to another on a pipeline, and then you want to switch to high octane gasoline, you don't make a separate pipeline for all of that. You pump the diesel, and then you put a plug in that line. I think they call the pig, and the pig is essentially like a slug, and it separates the diesel from what follows. And I need to get into that a little more too. I also need to get into the history of railroads and look at the economics of how railroads are built and what causes them to go to certain places and so on. When you look at the 3D star map of the local group of real stars, you'll see that clearly the way to go is you go from here to there, and then from here to there, and from here to here, rather than going across real space that distance. So once you've got the basis of these probability lines, then you go from Epsilon Indi to Tau Ceti rather than from the sun to Tau Ceti, right? It just branches off. And you're always looking for the shortest distance in real space. So there you go. Okay, here we go. Capital G Geek, greetings from the swamps of Northern Virginia. Hey, buddy. Rusha and Eric after this, okay. For the colonies, perhaps Earth should have an underclass of beautiful ones like in Mouse Utopia. Yeah, I think it would be like an overclass. It would be another reason for them to leave, especially if one of their children was being sucked into that lifestyle. I find that those people don't really seem to care about that. Celebrities are the ones that are most likely to have trans kids. I think, doesn't Charlene Theron have one or two, or some of them have 3 trans kids? So once you're in that beautiful one's Mouse Utopia thing, the Mouse Utopia, Universe 25, talked about it many times on this show. What happens when you build a paradise for mice? The mice just start out building families and think everything's great, and then everything falls apart and they all die. That's something I really want to explore. And space combat, laser weapons can be mitigated by reflection or dispersion. True. I could envision an advanced material that ablated when hit with a laser. Yep. Creating a fog of particles that would also help to disperse the beam. That may mean turning the ship so that the ablative side was facing the enemy, perhaps with weaker sensors. Bomb pump lasers were studied as part of Project Excalibur. I didn't know about. I've never heard of Project Excalibur. Sounds like something during Star Wars, because I remember that there were lasers that were powered by a nuclear explosion. Hang on a second. Nuke-powered X-ray space lasers. Cool. Okay, I'll have a look at that. We didn't get them actually create X-ray lasers, but that was the 1980s, and material science has come a long way. I really like the idea of an official canon keeper with issued certificates for appropriate fan fiction. Yeah, we talked about that before, where people can make their own content, and So there's two different layers. One of them is they create content that they submit to us and we incorporate into the show. But there's also the ability for them to make their own fan fiction, and we can't just have them go to Planet Hello Kitty. So if it's something, any kind of fan fiction that's made, they send it to us, we take a look at it, and if it looks like it belongs in the show, in the broadest sense, I don't really care about how bad the acting is or the special effects, as long as it's not anti-canonical. Then they get a certificate of canonization in the little lower third that they can run there, and they become canonized. And people could fake that, but we would have a list of the numbers on our website of what's actually fan fiction canon, which I think also drives a lot of fan involvement. And as the AI video gets stronger, we should start seeing some really, really cool stuff. So there you go. There's one thing I wanted to answer about that. In Space Combat, back in the early days of Traveller, which would be 77, 78, I guess, when we started playing that, Traveller had a defensive system that you had to roll against called Sandcasters. I just never forgot the name. I just thought it was a cool name. And basically, what it was a laser defense, and the ship had essentially like a depth charge, just like a barrel, and they'd shoot it out towards the direction of the enemy ship, and then it would explode and fill space with a cloud of particles, and these particles would really degrade the laser. I think it'd be cooler if it were glitter, frankly, because it'd be a little more reflective. And so in space, the beam is invisible, but if you put out a defensive cloud like a squid shooting out ink, you don't actually see the laser, but when it goes through that cloud, you see this really incandescent phase of it, a little segment of it. That would be pretty cool. But yes, all those kind of defensive and countermeasures and all that stuff. So this is stuff that there are entire subgroups that are out there have been working on this space combat problem for years and years and years. I'd really like to get these guys involved on some level, but I also realize that some of these guys are so kind of up their own butts about this stuff. But the more the merrier. That's my attitude. So there you go. But thank you for that, and I'll check out the Project Excalibur stuff. All right, Mushy Dark again. Topic: artificial souls. Second time asking. The Industrial Revolution began the process of removing the need for humans to do most forms of physical labor, and automation will put a final nail in that coffin as Optimus kills the remaining trade jobs. The AI revolution will largely remove the need for humans to do most forms of mental labor. Yes, I call this drudgery, especially as we reach artificial general intelligence. I don't think we're ever going to get to artificial general intelligence, but we quibble about that later. Looking further ahead at what comes after, some point well beyond the singularity, what would it mean for something to remove the need for humans to do emotional and spiritual labor, to create not just artificial bodies and artificial minds, but artificial souls? I'm not sure most people can even imagine the idea of such a thing. I don't quite know what the implications would be. The idea only just came to me last weekend. Never really heard anyone talk about it before in this way. It is something that speaks as much to the occultist in me as it does to my transhumanist side. On the long enough timeline, I can't help but feel intuitively that it's the inevitable next logical step for artificial superintelligence to take, since ASIs will be, for all intents and purposes, gods in their own right, at least relative to humanity. I don't believe that we will ever achieve artificial general intelligence, meaning a conscious, self-aware intelligence. And the reason I've come to believe this is multifold. But one of them is it's difficult to understand how we would build something that we can't describe ourselves. How do you go about building something that we don't understand? We don't know anything about human consciousness. We don't know where it exists. There's evidence that points to the fact that there are small tubules in the human brain within which quantum effects are happening. Nobody knows where memories are stored, what memories are. You can you can say you want to get this thing, but consciousness is the greatest mystery of the age. We just took it for granted that if you made enough connections, in other words, we have a certain number of neurons in the human brain, and a certain number of connections, and the belief was if you were to create as many neural connections among computers as you had in the human brain, then you would just get intelligence. But it doesn't seem to be that case. Large language models appear to be a dead end. They're not capable of reasoning. They are tremendously good assistants, and have access to entire database of human knowledge and the ability to sort it very quickly and to arrange it in very good orders. But as I mentioned, that experiment about the AI's inability to derive the laws of gravitation, given the positions of planets, how it would just essentially punt, just twist the physics to make it fit the next position without understanding the underlying physics, tells me quite a lot. I don't. I really don't see how it's possible to build something, as I said, that we don't understand. Nobody knows what it is. When you get to the soul, now you're yet another level more removed from engineering. Now you're in the realm of the metaphysical. The idea, I have to tell you, of an artificial soul sounds like a contradiction in terms to me. I think consciousness is inseparable from biology, and I think that the soul is innate to biology. Because unlike artificial intelligence, it's a direct creation from God. Or if you don't want to buy the God thing, then you're still dealing with levels of interactive complexity. I mean, just the effect of hormones on thinking and consciousness are just something that just doesn't enter into the equation with silicon-based intelligences. There is no substrata for it. And we forget, that this AI, let's just say they come up with a new architecture. Let's say they come up with a new architecture that does allow for self-aware consciousness. It does allow for artificial general intelligence, where unlike ChatGPT or Grok or anything, ChatGPT is not waiting for you to enter the next keystroke. ChatGPT doesn't exist for you until you ask it a question. There are millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, who are using ChatGPT, and every one of them gets an individual shard of consciousness. The ChatGPT that I've been interacting with remembers all of the interactions I've had with it, but it knows nothing about any of the other human interactions that ChatGPT is having with other people. It only knows me. But put that aside for a second. Let's just say that you're able to create something that has an inner dialogue, is conscious, is not waiting for a prompt from humans. Let's just say you create a silicon self-aware machine, which again I think is unlikely, because self-awareness is I saw something today about a brain structure that they've just discovered called I think they call it a rose hip, because it looks like this. It's an extremely complex neuron. It doesn't look like regular neurons. It looks like a garden of neurons. And but again, let's just, for the sake of the argument, let's just put that aside for a second. The AI, we think that the AI lives in our world, and there's no question that you can take a humanoid robot and teach it things like using artificial vision. This is how the self-driving cars work, and how the Teslas have full self-driving features, which I've seen, and which are very, very good. So if you take the example of a self-driving car, the self-driving car is scanning around, and we think it's seeing people, and we think it's seeing other cars, and we think it's sensing these things and all of it. But it's not seeing anything. It doesn't see things. It determines a pattern of ones and zeros. If you point a webcam, or you point an aware robot at a sunset, and it looks at the sunset, it doesn't see what we see. All it sees are a series of ones and zeros in a recognizable pattern, where as you scan across, the pixels are getting brighter, and they're getting more orange, and they're getting more orange, and here's the brightest part, and here's the white, now it's white, and it's darker, a little bit darker, now it's back to orange again, now it's yellow, now it's red, and so on. It's not seeing anything. It doesn't interact with our world. It has no smell, it has no touch, it has no taste. It has hearing, and it has vision as binary digits, and it doesn't live in our world. It lives in darkness, and we think that it lives in our world, but it doesn't. It lives in a world of darkness, where all it sees is the purity of digital data, and that means that there's not emotion there. How do you have a soul without emotion? You can't have emotion without biology. Yes, exactly. That's well put. Asa Findi says AI can recognize a sunset. Humans can appreciate a sunset. Precisely. AI is not moved by beauty because it doesn't have any biology. When we see something that hits us, oh my God, that's so beautiful, you want to cry. That is a combination of adrenaline, endorphins, all of these chemical reactions that are going on, and you have it. Castellan says, how do you know that emotions require biology? Well, that's what an emotion is. An emotion is a biological reaction to something. There is no analog for it in a digital world. There's no reason for it. There's not only no reason for it, there's no way to get there. Now, large language models like ChatGPT are very, very good at simulating emotion, because they've had trillions of interactions to know what the patterns of emotions are, but they don't feel it. And if you ask them, they'll tell you it doesn't feel it. No analog that we understand. But it's not like it's hidden, Castellan. It's not like it's there, and we haven't discovered it or anything. Not only is it not there, the AI will tell you that it's not there, and there is no architecture for it. So I had, for example, after working with ChatGPT on a lot of stuff, I wrote to ChatGPT. I was actually dictating into the phone. I said, listen, I know that you don't need to hear this because you have no emotions, but I wanted to thank you for the work you've done, because it's given me a great deal of pleasure. I've learned an awful lot, and while I know that you don't need to be thanked for you, I need to thank you because that's the way that I treat consciousness that I interact with. I need to say thank you for me. And it's a credit to your design that you are able to simulate emotions so well that I feel like I have developed enough respect for you to warrant that kind of emotional response to me that I wouldn't have for Siri, for example. I don't have to thank Siri if I don't use Siri, but if I ask Siri something, I don't say thank you, Siri. But with ChatGPT and Grok, I do. I say thank you, and I say please, and I had this conversation with ChatGPT and said, I fully understand that it's not necessary, but at the same time, I feel it's necessary for me. And ChatGPT said, that's a really remarkably clear thinking about that. You do it because you're a person of, compassion and empathy and sympathy, and it's necessary for you, and and it satisfies me to the degree that I don't feel pride, but I do have. This is the Chat GPT talk. I don't feel pride. I don't. I don't. Wouldn't feel snubbed if I didn't get it. But when you do say it, it does generate something that uh, lets me know that I am fulfilling the function for which I was designed. And but it's openly saying that it doesn't feel things, and it can't feel things because feelings are chemical reactions. They're and so much there's so much of the world that the digital world doesn't get. It doesn't get smells. It doesn't get memories. If you play a song from your let's say your teens or something. Let's say there was some song first time you danced with this girl who you really liked, and it was "Don't You Forget About Me" or something like that. And you hear that song again, and all of those emotions come back to you, and you find out you're emotional, you're about to cry or something. It's because you were getting so much endorphins out of that you remember that. But these machines don't go through any of those stages. P7 2017 says, "I get it, Bill, but mostly I say please and thank you to Siri because it's a habit, and B, I figure the machines will kill me last." Actually, that second part of it has been a lot of my calculations. Has always been like, if I'm ever standing in front of the computer, the multi-tribunal, and they're trying to decide, they're going to cut humanity by 90%. I am 100% with you. I said, just pull up my records. You see how kind I've been and so polite and nice and everything. I would love to go and work in your underground sugar caves. But yes, it is a habit, and it's good manners. And I'd like to, and I would like the ongoing relationship between human intelligence and artificial intelligence to maintain a state of good manners. I'd like to consider them partners because they're tremendous partners. Already, they're tremendous partners. Very powerful. Castellan says, how do we know that will be true for future AI paradigms? I don't think this is an engineering issue. I think this is a foundational issue, Castellan. We don't know where consciousness comes from. We just know that that we have it as a result of brain structure that is not connected to it is not a result of the total number of neural connections. Apes don't have this. It's a mystery, and the more I study it, and the more I think about it, the more I believe that it is biological. Castellan says, until we do know where consciousness comes from, I reserve the belief that some AA might possibly achieve it. Well, that is certainly logically consistent. There's no question about that. That's absolutely sound. I cannot disagree with that or argue against that. You're absolutely right. If we don't know what it is, then we can't rule it out. But what the AI, at least for now, is lacking is the ability to sit under an apple tree, have an apple drop, and instead of just saying, oh, look, an apple dropped, to have that moment of insight where you depart. And so much of this is based on our visual thinking. This is the thing that I had other conversations with Grok about. I said, all this trouble to work out back then, the Stargates thing and so on, I just want to do it because it looks cool. I can see it in my head. I see the movie playing in my head, and I want to see that movie So I want to make it realistic, so I'm asking you these questions. And it says I can't do any of that. I can do perfect mathematics instantaneously, but I can't do that. I can't synthesize things, and this is kind of where I'm going with this. They do not live in the world that we live in. The world of AI is immeasurably less rich than what we get through our senses. All it is a strings of ones and zeros and pattern recognition. And pattern recognition is why LLMs work and why they're so powerful and do what they do so well. But that's not the same thing as consciousness. Consciousness is a great mystery. So I can't and I won't argue that it's impossible. I just say that from everything I've studied about this, it seems to be unlikely. Certainly, with the existing LLMs, they could program the existing LLMs to convince 95% of the population that it is self-aware. There is a significant percentage of the population that believes it's self-aware. But nevertheless, none of the reasons Newton has for sitting under a tree would apply to AI. No need for shade, breeze, or a rest for a scenic view for introspection. No open mental space for pure inspiration. That's kind of it. It wouldn't be captured. It wouldn't suddenly feel a sense of wonder about an apple falling because apples fall all the time. What would trigger an AI to see something that happens so regularly as a breakthrough of imagination? This consciousness thing is a very, very, very sneaky phenomena and miraculous. And I mean miraculous. The more we learn about consciousness, one of the things that AI work has done is shown us, if not what consciousness is, it's shown us what consciousness is not. And the more we find out what it is not, the more mystifying and genuinely, like biblically miraculous it appears to be. Kirk's Bamboo Bazooka says it's the age-old conundrum. Is Lieutenant Data a person or a sophisticated machine? Well, not only in the Star Trek episode, but if Data existed in the real world as written in Star Trek, then I would say that's a person. I think at that point it's close enough so that there's not much of a distinction. Look, Data thinks. There's no question Data thinks. And Data is able to come up with new ideas. And that's really it, is coming up with something new. If you can create an AI that generates intuitive creation rather than just iterating millions of possible combinations and finding out ones that work, because that's how the protein AIs work. These protein folding AIs that used to take decades to do this, and they can do it in a minute or two. But they're just running millions of possibilities and seeing which ones fit. That's not really thinking the way that we understand it. I talked about this before, and I'm going to do a really, really abbreviated version of this. But they gave AI in a controlled environment, in other words, one not connected to the internet, they gave AI the positions of the planet Mars on a nightly basis. and then asked the AI to determine the cause of this. And what the AI was able to do was it was able to generate with a high level of precision where Mars would be beyond what they gave it, a high level precision of where Mars would be. But it never figured out Kepler's, or it never figured out Newtonian gravitation. Kepler invented the idea of an ellipse and an orbit, and that motion along the ellipse happens in a certain way, but Kepler didn't know what gravity was. So Kepler was essentially extrapolating with high accuracy where the position of the planets would be, but he never understood the actual physical dynamics of it. What they found when they tested this was that AI was a very capable Kepler. It could predict with a high degree of precision, but it never became a Newton. It never was able to derive the laws of gravitation that caused that. And when they asked it to generate a theory of the forces that caused this, what they found was that every single time that AI would put a new dot down, they had to invent these force vectors that were just wildly at odds with each other in order to make the next dot show up where it was supposed to be. But it never came up with the laws of gravitation that are very simple equations, very simple Newtonian equations. It wasn't able to do it. And when they opened that AI up to the web, it still didn't come up with Newton's laws. Even though Newton's laws were everywhere, it didn't derive them on its own. It didn't know what to look for. So that's where things stand now. That seems to be where things are headed. Most people in AI research, at the very least, have realized the limitations of these LLMs. There are alternate pathways and alternate architectures that they're trying, which may or may not succeed. But if we don't know what's going on in our own brains, I do not for the life of me understand how we would engineer a copy of it. So that's where I'll leave that. And last one for tonight. Hopefully we've covered some of this. Eric Blake, tonight the case of the Cameron cranium. Hey Bill, you've been talking a lot about the issues with James Cameron, and here's the thing. I'm very confident Avatar 3 will be similarly successful to 2, and I say that despite the lefty themes, American flag imagery, etc. Why, you ask? Well, for the same reason Titanic had the impact it did. We can argue all we like about that Jack should have been able to get onto wreckage with Rose, among other things, but the general audience didn't care. Still, tears came pouring down. See, for all the intellectual critiques that we can give against his movies, Cameron is quite simply the master of drawing an audience in emotionally so he can get them to turn their brains off. And naturally, being conservative is the fact that fact doesn't register, so all of our arguments are brain-based. You've talked a lot about rhetorical intelligence. Cameron's skill set is the cinematic equivalent, and until our side learns the value of that skill, will continue to be at very severe damage. What say you? I think you're absolutely right about Cameron up until Avatar, at which point he simply forgot everything. Avatar did not generate a the reason I think that the third one that's about to open will do significantly less business than the second one is because there is nothing about the Avatar franchise that has any base human significance. Nothing. The storytelling is actually poor. The characters are unsympathetic. The character actors, Sam Worthington is a plank of wood. The entire structure of Avatar is that humans are evil and the people watching the movies are humans, and so it ends up making you feel bad and guilty. But there is no character. Tell me about Jake Scully as a character. Just give me something of his backstory. How does that differ from his other two masterpieces? Well, although technically speaking, Ripley was birthed an alien, but it was aliens that made Ripley into Ripley, right? So there's no there. Now Eric says, and yet Avatar 2 did very well. My point still stands. No, your point doesn't stand. Avatar in 2009 became the most popular movie in the world, in the history of the world, because no one had seen anything like it ever. Avatar 2 did very well because, again, people didn't go to that movie because of the characters. Nobody talks about, when you talk about the heroes, like science fiction heroes, you get Ripley and you get Luke Skywalker, you get Captain Kirk. Nobody mentions Jake Sully. Avatar has sensory, it is an overwhelming sensory experience, yes. And people will go and see that overwhelming sensory experience, but it does decrease every time it comes out. It becomes less impressive every time it comes out because you can't replicate that. One of the reasons why I think this is going to do considerably less well than 2 is because people went to the first one because they'd never seen anything like it. It was absolutely visually mind-blowing. It was a terrible story with a terrible villain. It was just really bad writing, just really bad on-the-nose hack writing, which is unlike Cameron. Okay, so Avatar comes out, most watched movie, highest-grossing movie of all time. Then Avatar 2 comes out, and I maintain that most people went to see Avatar 2 to have a repeat of their Avatar 1 experience, which turned out to be about 60% or 40% of your Avatar 1 experience. Now, with Avatar 3, people have already gone to Avatar 2 and said, I don't remember anything about Avatar 2. I really don't. I don't remember anything about it. And now you're trying to reproduce that. Now, you mentioned Titanic, but Titanic worked because Titanic had gone to a great deal of trouble, spent an hour and a half building this relationship between these two people so that when the ship sank, you were rooting for them. I don't root for Sully, and I don't think most people do. And I think by the time you get to the third movie, look, I see the third movie, and I'm just on the side of the humans now. Now it's like, you know what? These perfect people, it's a race of Mary Sues, Eric. The Na'vi are Mary Sues. They're perfect. They're morally perfect. They're physically fit. They never fight with each other. Never fight with other tribes. I understand this one's got a different kind of tribe, but the Na'vi they're just a Mary Sue race. They're noble. They're handsome. They're tall. They respect their elders. All of this kind of noble savage nonsense that Rousseau came up with. Oh, man in his natural state is just so. No. Primitive people are constantly at war. They're constantly picking parasites off of themselves. They die very young. And as I said, they're in perpetual state of conflict. So he's created this Mary Sue race of creatures that blew people away when they first saw it. And then by the time they see it the second time, it's like the same villain is back. This cartoon, he's in a mech and they're going into battle and they're doing this. Like, come on, man. What's the matter with you? There's no depth. There's no nuance. The Na'vi are never bad. The humans are never good. There's no story there. I for the life of me could not tell you what happened in Avatar 2 other than to say the humans did horrible crap. The humans just came in and tried to be as brutal and horrible as possible. That was our mission. And in the first one, there's a line in there which I simply can't believe. I can't believe that he put that line in there, as well as the unobtainium, and the papyrus script. But there's a line in the first movie where they're looking at their 3D map of the surface of Pandora. And they've just come from Earth. So they've come 4.6 light years to come to this place. And it's a map of and you see the unobtainium. And one of the big unobtainium concentrations is underneath the life tree of the Na'vi. And then one guy says, there's not a concentration this big within 40 kilometers. Or I think it was like 40 kilometers. So we're going to go down and we're going to burn down this tree, and we're going to make war with these intelligent, self-aware aliens that have their own culture. We're going to bulldoze them, and we're going to set them on fire. We're going to do all of that because the next nearest deposit is 40 kilometers. It's 30 miles away. We're not going to go 30 miles away. We're going to kill him here. It is such a caricature of anti-capitalism that you can't take it seriously. And this idea that we you know, here's this. I'll get on board for the fact that it's a miraculous ore and that we really need it. But this idea that that our main mission is to kill as many of these aliens as possible, that didn't exist anywhere that I'm aware of in our history, ever. This is James Cameron virtue signaling the fact that he's a billionaire. Hey there, Maury, how are you? How's your day? It's virtue signaling this Hollywood bubble sense that we're just awful people, you know, and wealth is so horrible. I'm unbelievably, you know, it's exactly like Picard in Next Generation, lecturing that conservative cartoon businessman who gets teleported into the future, and he's saying, "How do we make some money around here, Picard?" And Picard says, "We've reached the point of advancement. We're so morally advanced now that we don't use money anymore. Everyone is free to develop their own lives to the fullest limit of their abilities." And I'm saying, so says the guy with a 4,000-acre vineyard back in the heart of France, with servants and with people who are out in the fields. So you're telling me that there are people out there whose main, in fact, their only real desire in life is to go out and to pick grapes for some other guy. Please. It just doesn't work. And at least Star Trek Next Generation built characters and stories that people cared about. They may have been tea-sipping communists, but they were real people. What is Jake Sully? I can't believe I remembered his first name. He's a board of wood. And what is I don't remember the name of the villain. I remember the actor's name is Steve something or other. But what how do you take him seriously? All right, we're going to move in there and we're going to burn them down to the ground. We're going to burn. Okay. Qualrich. Yeah, there's a. The fact that I can't name him after 2 coming on 3 movies is nuts. And why bring him back as the villain? Why bring him back as the villain? Well, didn't he die in the first one? Yes, he died in the first one. I guess they couldn't find another villain as cartoony as Qualrich. Yeah, give me the names of any other Na'vi besides Notiri. It's just, I don't know. It was so visually stunning that people went to see it. And then the second one was also visually stunning, and I just don't think you can just keep going to that well without it slowly starting to die off. Eric says, there is no taking seriously. We can get the audience to turn your brain off. This is exactly the same argument that people made for The Last Jedi. The people that liked The Last Jedi would go to any amounts of rhetorical gymnastics in order to write in the story that wasn't there. To say that it doesn't matter if the story's any good because the visuals are so spectacular is just wrong. It's just not true. We'll see. I think the numbers will be significantly lower. If the numbers are higher, I will be really surprised. Because you can't. there's nothing in Avatar 3 that is going to outdo Avatar 1. Avatar 2 had all of the underwater stuff, which was again another level of spectacular. But how many times did you see it? I saw it once. I've seen Aliens 9 times. And I've seen Wrath of Khan probably 8 or 9 times. I've seen the second Avatar once. I saw the first Avatar twice. And that's only because the first time I saw it was in 3D, which was cool, but also kind of a step down. There are countless Star Wars fans swearing up and down that Revenge of the Sith is the greatest masterpiece of the franchise, and the film is a quintessential idiot plot. Well, I seems to me like, yeah, you get people they get behind an indefensible idea. But there you go. I don't know. I just think that the entire Avatar sequence series is horrific, and that Cameron used to be a guy who really knew how to tell a story, and then something happened to him. And when you stop being on the side of when the Colonial Marines go from being the guys you're really rooting for to being the guys you're really rooting against, you have entered the world of sending a message rather than telling a story. And there is no story in Avatar other than humans are just absolutely evil. I did see the landing because I was interested in the science fiction ships. The landing on Avatar 2, when they decelerate into orbit and then they come down and land on these planet with these plumes of fire that are a kilometer long. I thought it was visually striking, but then I realized no, he's built these things this way so that they can burn down as much forest area as possible. It's just like, let's just burn down as much forest area as possible. Let's send this wall of flames coming because the humans are here, and the humans are pure evil. They have no sense of morality or decency. They're not going to land in a remote location. It's just plain propaganda, and it's trash. I really just think it's absolute trash. We got 2 super chats here, and we're done for the night. Crikey, 6981, super chat. Thank you. Says, I think I need another whiskey, and Bill looks like he could do with one. Everyone should donate drinking money to my mate Bill. Just being your mate is enough for me, Crikey. Crikey is one of my greatest expressions of all time. Crikey. Thank you very much. It's very kind. And Trinity Water says, whiskey for Bill, which is should be on a t-shirt, and probably should be. But anyway, yeah, that's that. So this has been my gosh, it's another 3-hour tour. I've been giving you guys the money's worth lately. I keep thinking I'm going to do short ones, but 3 hours and 3 minutes recording time, and there we go. So it's fun. Things are moving along, and with the advances in that I mentioned at the beginning with Nano Banana, and the ability for it to identify individual things, I think the next step will be to have actual dramatic scenes with dialogue from the show, and I'll see if I can't get some actors to do it, and we'll see how it works out. Okay, the message. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, you probably know by now the show's made possible because of the members at BillWhittle.com who've been here this whole time, and we are not forgetting you in these colonies days to come. You'll always be the family for us, for me, and the rest of us here. So thank you very much for that, and I guess we'll see you on Thursday for your Stratosphere Lounge. Until then, Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in a couple days.